Chapter 179. Her divine sense once again lashed out, hitting the water carp beast's primordial spirit. At the same time, the shuttle of flying Apsara's golden rays fiercely enveloped it. The water carp beast let out a loud roar as it furiously swung its tail, furiously hitting the defensive barrier with all its might. The 7 people supporting the fortified defensive formation were instantly injured. Xianxia's expression changed, and he coughed up a mouthful of blood. The defensive barrier above his head also shook and looked like it was on the verge of breaking. Ren Yufeng said happily, "It's going to die soon. Hold on a little longer." Emotienga glared at him angrily. He was the only late-stage foundation-building cultivator on the scene, yet he didn't even help in such a dangerous situation. Even if his spells and magic tools couldn't harm the water carp beast, he could still transfer spiritual aura to her or the other 7 people. But now wasn't the time to turn hostile, so she didn't say anything. Instead, she took out a magic talisman Lord Daoist Jinghe gave her from her Qiankuan bag, then swung her hand and flew out of the gap in the defensive barrier. This talisman contained the power of a sharp weapon. It flew out of the defensive barrier lightly and soundlessly transformed into a streak of sword light, piercing into the body of the water carp beast with a light but sharp edge. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the shuttle of flying Apsara broke out of the water carp beast's body. The water carp beast frantically swung its tail, but in the end, it couldn't hold on any longer. It let out a whimper and went limp. Blood flowed out of the water carp beast's body, dyeing the surrounding water red. The scene was extremely quiet. Everyone still hadn't regained their senses from this battle. Emotienga was the first to wave her hand. The shuttle of flying Apsara's golden rays emitted a clanging sound and flew back to her hand. The others finally woke up as if they had just woken up from a dream. Senior Martial Brothers Xiang, Ai Xian and Xiahou Yuan shouted at the same time. The 2 of them were closest to Xiangjiang, so they immediately rushed forward to support him. The blue defensive barrier above their heads cracked, and Xiangjiang fell down. Ren Yufeng hastily went to check on Xiangjiang's condition. Although none of the 10 of them died, the 2 middle-stage foundation-building cultivators were half dead and almost lost their fighting strength. Taking advantage of this period of rest, Emotienga quietly asked Jiang Shanghong, "Senior Martial Brother Jiang, what's inside that secret area that made you guys willing to look for an outsider instead of revealing this matter to the group?" This time, Emotienga's tone wasn't distant, making Jiang Shanghong happy. He leaned closer and said, "Junior Martial Brother Yi, I once told you that there's a mysterious aura in this land of hiding dragon, right?" "But Senior Martial Brother Jiang, didn't you say that even the nascent soul seniors don't know what's going on?" "That's right, it's supposed to be like this." Jiang Shanghong hesitated for a moment before he said, "Every time we enter this land of hidden dragons, the scenery is completely different. However, there's only one place that's the same, the Divine Dragon Monument in the center. Now, no one can recognize the words on the Divine Dragon Monument. That mysterious aura is coming from the Divine Dragon Monument. For thousands of years, the disciples in the sect have been saying that this mysterious aura is the breath of the Divine Dragon. Divine Dragon's breath." Emotienga repeated. Although they couldn't be certain that it was the Divine Dragon's breath, based on the fact that these Zhengfa sect disciples gave it this name, it was obvious that this mysterious breath was definitely unusual. In the end, none of us knows whether it's the Divine Dragon Monument or not. Jiang Shanghong sighed and said, "For so many years, the nascent soul grandmasters of Zhengfa sect have never been able to completely understand this Divine Dragon Monument. They only know that the power contained in this monument is extraordinary and can't be offended. It's also because our Zhengfa sect hasn't been around for a long time. Maybe after several tens of thousands of years, with the combined efforts of several generations of disciples, we'll be able to comprehend it. Zhengfa sect was founded several thousand years ago, but in fact, it couldn't be considered a long time. A nascent soul cultivator's lifespan was about 1 or 2,000 years, so several thousand years was only enough for a few generations. Among the 7 great cultivation groups in the celestial pole, Zhengfa sect was the only one that had been founded for several thousand years. All the other cultivation groups had been around for more than 10,000 years. What does this have to do with the secret place you guys discovered? Jiang Shanghong said, it's precisely because we haven't been able to comprehend this divine dragon monument and because the nascent soul grandmasters are all busy cultivating that over time, disciples like us simply don't go to the divine dragon monument's location. Last time, the four of us entered this land of hidden dragons together and happened to go to the divine dragon monument, but we suddenly discovered something abnormal there. Jiang Shanghong paused for a moment. As he expected, he saw curiosity on Mo Tiange's face, so he continued to say, there's nothing wrong with the divine dragon monument. What's wrong is that an entrance to an underground palace appeared next to the divine dragon monument. An underground palace? Mo Tiange asked. An underground palace underwater? Correct. Jiang Shanghong continued to say, when we came in, it was just after the 15th day of the 8th month, so we should be the first batch of disciples to see this underground palace. After we entered the underground palace, we sensed an aura that was exactly the same as the aura on the divine dragon monument, but it was much stronger. Well, since it was called divine dragon's breath, it must be extremely vast and majestic. However, nascent soul cultivators were already helpless against the divine dragon monument, yet this unknown underground palace unexpectedly also had such a mysterious aura, and it was much stronger than before? How could foundation-building cultivators like them possibly offend such an aura? Mo Tiange's expression changed several times. In the end, she said, Senior Martial Brother Jiang, regardless of whether this is divine dragon's breath or not, you said the power of this aura is extraordinary and can't be offended. What can we obtain by entering the underground palace? Jiang Shanghong smiled bitterly. This question? I really can't answer it because Senior Martial Brother Ren was the only one who found the time to go inside. Then why did you still advise me like that? Mo Tiange wrinkled her brows and suppressed the unhappiness in her heart. Jiang Shanghong solemnly guaranteed that the inside wasn't too dangerous and they could obtain treasures. As it turned out, even he himself wasn't sure. Jiang Shanghong sighed. It was Senior Martial Brother Ren who guaranteed that. At that time, as soon as we entered the underground palace, we were stopped by the water carp beast guarding the entrance. Senior Martial Brother Ren used a magic talisman to temporarily trap the water carp beast so the three of us could deal with it. He himself went inside to take a look. What did Senior Martial Brother Ren say in the end? Jiang Shanghong paused for a moment, then said with some hesitation, Senior Martial Brother Ren said the layout inside was complicated. He only had time to take a few glances, and there seemed to be a pill concocting room. Although that was what he said, Jiang Shanghong himself wasn't too sure. A pill concocting room. Since it was an underwater underground palace, how could there possibly be a pill concocting room? Junior Martial Brother Yi. Jiang Shanghong stared at her and said frankly, I've already told you the truth, I'm only an ordinary cultivator in Zhengfa sect. Senior Martial Brother Ren's cultivation level is higher than mine, and he's also a core formation martial uncle's inner disciple, so his status is much higher than mine. Last time, I was able to accompany him to this land of hiding dragon because I was familiar with Junior Martial Brother Tangfong. Whatever he said, I naturally had no choice but to obey. However, he also had no reason to deceive us, right? What he said made sense. If there weren't any benefits, Ren Yufeng wouldn't have gone through so much trouble to find someone to take the risk with him. Mo Tiange thought for a moment then asked, Senior Martial Brother Jiang, since you can discover the underground palace, other people can too. There's bound to be people who happen to go to the Divine Dragon Monument. Can you guarantee that no one else saw it after you left? When this question was brought up, Jiang Shanghong smiled and said, You can rest assured. When we left last time, Senior Martial Brother Ren and Senior Martial Brother Xiang used a special technique to hide it, so other disciples in the same realm as us definitely couldn't see it. It's precisely because the scenery of this land of hiding dragon changes every year and we don't have a lot of time that we came here in a hurry. Just as they were talking, Ren Yufeng, who seemed to have finished treating Lu Rongxing and Xiang Jiang's injuries, walked towards them. Junior Martial Sister Yi, Junior Martial Brother Jiang, what are you talking about? Ren Yufeng's current expression was very amiable. It seemed like he was in a very good mood after smoothly killing the water carp beast. After spending half a day with him, Immortal felt that not only did he have a bad temper and a high opinion of himself, but he also didn't have any leadership skills. He only relied on his status and cultivation level, so the things he did were indeed unpleasant. However, since he greeted her with a smile, there was no reason for her to slap him in the face. Therefore, she also smiled politely. I'm still a little unclear about this land of hiding dragon, so I was asking Senior Marshal Brother Jiang. In fact, Junior Marshal Sister, ye can just ask me. Junior Marshal Brother Jiang also doesn't know much. Ren Yufeng waved his hand, seeming to be very proud of himself. Upon hearing what he said, Jiang Shanghong helplessly glanced at her and said, Junior Marshal Sister Yi, you can chat with Senior Marshal Brother Ren. I'll go check on my 2 senior marshal brothers. Knowing Jiang Shanghong didn't want to and didn't dare to offend Ren Yufeng, Immortal didn't ask him to stay. In any case, she wasn't afraid of Ren Yufeng. From what she saw just now, Ren Yufeng's water-escaping technique was top-notch, but as for his means, he really didn't deserve to be called a late-stage foundation-building elite disciple of a big cultivation group. Even if Ren Yufeng didn't use any of his tricks, Immortal was confident she wasn't inferior to him. If they fought, she had more than an 80% chance of winning. Once Jiang Shanghong left, Ren Yufeng said to Immortal, Junior Marshal Sister Yi, the magic tool in your hand is unusual, and you also have several treasures on you. Presumably, you're an elite disciple, right? Junior Marshal Brother Jiang once said he was only a disciple of a small cultivation group on Kunwa Mountain, so how did Junior Marshal Sister Yi know him? He actually came to inquire about the relationship between the two of them. Immortal smiled calmly. When I met Senior Marshal Brother Jiang, I wasn't a disciple of Xianxia school yet. Oh! Ren Yufeng said with astonishment, Junior Marshal Brother Jiang came to Zhengfa sect more than 10 years ago. At that time, Junior Marshal Sister Yi actually wasn't a disciple of Xianxia school yet? Correct. After I parted ways with Senior Marshal Brother Jiang, he came to Zhengfa sect, and I happened to go to Xianxia school. Ren Yufeng was even more astonished by Immortal's acknowledgement. I heard Junior Marshal Brother Jiang said he only built his foundation after he came to Zhengfa sect. Presumably, Junior Marshal Sister Yi also hadn't built her foundation back then? In more than 10 years, Junior Marshal Sister Yi advanced from the aura refining realm to the foundation building realm and then to the middle stage of the foundation building realm. This cultivation speed is really inconceivable. Junior Marshal Sister Yi, you're really a genius. Immortal said faintly, I was just lucky and Master took pity on me, that's all. I don't deserve to be called a genius. I'll only dare to accept this title if I form my gold core one day. Although she was being modest, she still revealed her confidence in her gold core. Ren Yufeng's gaze towards her was suddenly filled with envy and jealousy. In the end, he squeezed out a smile and said, as soon as I saw Junior Marshal Sister Yi, I knew Junior Marshal Sister must be a talented and intelligent person. I never expected Junior Marshal Sister Yi would actually exceed my expectations. Just now, we killed that water carp beast thanks to Junior Marshal Sister Yi's magic tools and magic talismans. Since Junior Marshal Sister Yi has such treasures on you, presumably, your master must be extraordinary. May I know which Master Daoist he is? Since Xianxia School and Zhengfa sect were friendly groups, there was nothing she couldn't say about her master, so Immortal immediately answered, my master's surname is Ma, and his Daoist name is Xin. She made up a lie. First, Lord Daoist Jinghe reminded her that it was best to hide her name and origin when she was outside. Second, Lord Daoist Jinghe's reputation was too resounding, and Zhengfa sect was also a friendly group, so how could she hide her identity? She said it was Lord Daoist Xianin, but she was indeed taught by this martial uncle Xianin. Furthermore, Lord Daoist Xianin had just advanced to the nascent soul realm and had always been low-key, so a half-truth like this was much easier to cover than a pure lie. Ma Xianin? Ren Yufeng repeated the name, and the way he looked at her immediately changed. Could it be Lord Daoist Xianin? Yes. Immortal smiled faintly, looking happy for her master. My master just advanced to the nascent soul realm a few years ago. I didn't expect senior martial brother Ren to have also heard of him. A few years ago, Lord Daoist Xuanin's nascent soul ceremony shook the entire celestial pole. Who doesn't know about him? Ren Yufeng's tone became a bit more polite. I never expected junior martial sister Yi to be Lord Daoist Xuanin's brilliant disciple. I've truly been disrespectful. Chapter 180. Upon learning that Emo Tiange was Lord Daoist Xuanin's disciple, Ren Yufeng's attitude immediately changed. Originally, although he didn't look down on Emo Tiange like Jiang Shanghang and the other disciples of his school, he only maintained a superficial respect for her. Now, however, his gaze was filled with respect. A nascent soul cultivator's disciple, even if it was only a nominal disciple, was several times more noble than a core formation cultivator's disciple. According to Ren Yufeng's conjecture, Emo Tiange was most likely still an official disciple. Because Lord Daoist Xianyin hadn't formed his nascent soul for long, most of his disciples were definitely still in the foundation-building realm. However, based on the cultivation level and methods Emo Tiange displayed, she was definitely qualified to be an advanced inner disciple of a core formation cultivator. Ren Yufeng corrected his attitude in his heart, but at the same time, he was secretly jealous. Why did other people have this kind of luck to become a disciple of a core formation cultivator? Coincidentally, Master actually formed his nascent soul, so he had to painstakingly plan everything himself? However, no matter how jealous he was, he still had to put on a polite attitude. Fortunately, Emo Tiange wasn't an arrogant person, so he didn't feel too uncomfortable. The two chatted for a while, and Lu Rongxing and Xiang Jiang's injuries were finally treated. Senior martial brother Ren. The person who called out to them was an early-stage foundation-building cultivator named Tang Fong. He seemed to be the youngest among the 9 people from Zhengfa sect. He cast a somewhat timid glance at Emo Tiange, then said to Ren Yufeng, Senior martial brother Lu and senior martial brother Xiang's injuries have already stabilized. Should we leave now? Ren Yufeng looked around. Sure enough, Lu Rongxing and Xiang Jiang both stood up. Although their faces were still deathly pale, their expressions were already at ease. The 5th-rank water carp beast's carcass was also dealt with. Then let's continue. Ren Yufeng then turned towards Emo Tiange and said, Junior martial sister Yi, you don't mind if we divide the demonic beast's carcass after we leave the land of hiding dragon, right? I don't mind. The group of 10 people once again met up. With Ren Yufeng leading the way, they continued their journey. Emo Tiange silently followed the group, but she had a bad premonition in her heart. Both Lu Rongxing and Xiang Jiang seemed to be seriously injured. Even if they suppressed their injuries, it was likely that they would not be able to exert much power. Ren Yufeng was too arrogant, Tang Fong and Yu Xiaoran were too inexperienced. The 2 female cultivators, Ai Xian and Xia Hoyuan, didn't seem to have any opinions of their own. There was also a male cultivator named Qiu Jiming, but she still couldn't tell what he was thinking at the moment. Jiang Shanghang, on the other hand, was someone she was familiar with. Whether it was his methods or his wisdom, he wasn't weak. For this team to enter a place guarded by a rank 5 demonic beast was truly not a good thing. She really didn't believe what Ren Yufeng said about only having a 7th-rank demonic beast guarding the door. How could a place with a so-called divine dragon's breath be simple? During the silence, Ren Yufeng took the lead and stopped. He turned around and said, Junior martial brothers and sisters, we've arrived at the Divine Dragon Monument. Prepare to remove the restrictions. We've arrived? Emo Tiange was puzzled. Didn't the Divine Dragon Monument have the breath of the Divine Dragon? Why didn't she feel it at all? Looking up, the surrounding scenery was no different from other places. It was still dark blue seawater and corals everywhere. Junior martial sister Yi, Ren Yufeng called out, there's a restriction around the Divine Dragon Monument. We have to remove it first before we can go in. Junior martial brother Xiang and junior martial brother Lu are both injured, and the cultivation levels of the others aren't high enough. Can you lend me a hand? Emo Tiange muttered to herself for a moment, then nodded. All right. Aside from her, there were no other middle-stage foundation-building cultivators present. After obtaining her permission, Ren Yufeng pointed at the area next to him and said, "This restriction was placed by a nascent soul senior in our school. I have a method to remove it temporarily, but it consumes too much spiritual aura, so we need to lay a spirit gathering formation first. However, a temporary spirit gathering formation can't accommodate so many people at the same time. Right now, aside from me, Junior Martial Sister Ye's cultivation level is the highest, so I'll have to ask Junior Martial Sister Yi to stand together with me in this spirit gathering formation. When the time comes, you only need to transmit your spiritual aura to me." Mo Tiange did as she was told, and Ren Yufeng immediately laid a simple spirit gathering formation around the two of them. Mo Tiange looked at it. This spirit gathering formation wasn't ordinary. It seemed to be the work of a core formation cultivator. This Ren Yufeng was quite rich, but why didn't he have any effective methods when he was fighting the water carp beast? She didn't have much time to think. After the spirit gathering formation was laid, Ren Yufeng started to cast an art. He took out a jade slip, then wiped his finger, forcing a drop of blood essence to drip onto the jade slip. A ray of light shone from the jade slip. In an instant, the spirit gathering formation shone brightly and spiritual aura crazily gathered. "Junior Martial Sister Yi, lend me a hand," Ren Yufeng shouted. Mo Tiange didn't say a word. She just put her palms together, gathered spiritual aura, pressed it against the middle of Ren Yufeng's back, then transferred her spiritual aura into his meridians. The light from the jade slip became brighter and brighter until it finally condensed into a spiritual light. In a split second, Mo Tiange felt all the spiritual aura in her body madly rushing towards Ren Yufeng's body. To be exact, she wasn't transferring spiritual aura into Ren Yufeng's body. Rather, Ren Yufeng was absorbing her spiritual aura. That jade slip absorbed both Ren Yufeng's and her spiritual aura, but it still greedily absorbed the spiritual aura from the spirit gathering formation. Mo Tiange had no choice but to take out a restorative panacea and stuff it into her mouth. However, the little bit of spiritual aura she received was still quickly absorbed by the jade slip. Mo Tiange's expression couldn't help but change. What kind of restriction was this? She already had the token, but it still needed so much spiritual aura. Wasn't this too overbearing? Fortunately, just as her spiritual aura was about to be completely absorbed, the jade slip stopped absorbing spiritual aura. Ren Yufeng shouted loudly. The jade slip once again burst with light, submerging several people together. Mo Tiange only felt as if something had been opened. Soon afterward, a powerful force rushed into her body, violently rushing into her meridians. In an instant, she felt a great pain. From her meridians to her internal organs, everything was crushed by that force. She almost lost consciousness. Junior Martial Sister Yi, Junior Martial Sister Yi. In her daze, she heard someone calling her name. Jiang Shanghong's voice. Jiang Shanghong said to Ren Yufeng with a bit of anger, "Senior Martial Brother Ren, do you want to kill Junior Martial Sister Yi? This restriction will backfire, but you actually let Junior Martial Sister Yi bear this force alone." After a while, Ren Yufeng's voice rang out, sounding a bit annoyed. "It's me who never expected Junior Martial Sister Ye's cultivation level to be so profound. The spiritual aura she transferred to me surpassed my own, so that power naturally went to her. I didn't have time to." Then came Ai Xian's overbearing voice. "Junior Martial Brother Jiang, what do you mean? Do you think Senior Martial Brother Ren would deliberately let your Junior Martial Sister Yi get injured?" By the time she finished speaking, her tone was already filled with contempt. Jiang Shanghong said angrily, "Senior Martial Sister Ai. I was the one who called Junior Martial Sister Yi here. I naturally have to guarantee her safety. Then why are you yelling at Senior Martial Brother Ren?" Ai Xian didn't give in at all. "Don't forget your identity. You're just an ordinary disciple, and Senior Martial Brother Ren is an elite disciple. You actually dared to talk to him like that." Jiang Shanghong didn't answer, but Mo Tiange could feel his hand, which was holding her, trembling. Even if she was dissatisfied with Jiang Shanghong, at this moment, she no longer had any anger. With Jiang Shanghong's status in Zhengfa sect, he didn't dare to offend Ren Yufeng, but he was willing to protect her at this time. This was already very rare. How could Ren Yufeng not know? Mo Tiange sneered inwardly. Although she was on guard against this person, she didn't expect that he would scheme against her before they even entered the underground palace. Apparently, she still wasn't careful enough. Ren Yufeng actually dared to scheme against her like this after learning she was Lord Daoist Xuanin's disciple. However, presumably, Ren Yufeng also didn't know that her meridians were different from ordinary people's, right? This kind of backlash that could seriously injure ordinary cultivators wasn't too serious for her. As long as she recuperated for a while, she would be able to recover 80% of her strength. At that time, she just needed to take a green amplifying pill and adjust her breath. Someone opened her mouth and stuffed a medicinal pill into it. Soon afterward, she heard Jiang Shanghong's voice transmission. "Junior Martial Brother Yi, I didn't protect you well enough. If you're still conscious, quickly recuperate and I'll take you out safely." Upon hearing what he said, Mo Tiange swallowed the medicinal pill, then silently circulated her breath. She didn't know what medicinal pill Jiang Shanghong gave her, but once it entered her stomach, a gust of ice-cold spiritual aura spread and immediately alleviated her pain. "Junior Martial Brother Jiang." Ren Yufeng's voice was no longer annoyed. "It seems your relationship with this junior martial sister Yi isn't ordinary." Jiang Shanghong said coldly, "Junior martial sister Yi and I had a life-and-death friendship. Our relationship naturally isn't ordinary." "In other words, you're very dissatisfied with me now?" "I don't dare." Although he said he didn't dare, Jiang Shanghong's voice wasn't as soft as before. "Senior martial brother Ren naturally doesn't need to explain things to ordinary disciples like me. It's good that you know." AI Xian interrupted. "If it weren't for senior martial brother Ren, we wouldn't have been able to enter this place at all, let alone look for treasures. You wouldn't be stupid enough to fall out with us for your junior martial sister Yi, right?" "Of course not." Jiang Shanghong slowly exhaled. "I'm a disciple of Zhengfa sect after all, so senior martial brothers and sister statuses are above mine. Junior martial brother Jiang, you've always been reasonable, you didn't disappoint me." Ren Yufeng was unprecedentedly kind. "We're all disciples of the same sect, so why should we lose our harmony for others? Since junior martial sister Yi was unfortunately seriously injured, we can't do anything about it. Treasure hunting is more important, so let's go into the underground palace first and take junior martial sister Yi with us when we come out." "Senior martial brother Ren," Jiang Shanghong said, "this place isn't that safe. If we leave junior martial sister Yi here by herself, what if she's in danger? There's also danger when we look for treasures." Although the current Ren Yufeng wasn't as arrogant as before, his slippery tone made people feel even more uncomfortable. "If junior martial sister Yi really is that unfortunate, we can only be afraid that she's unlucky." Jiang Shanghong was silent for a long time. Ren Yufeng then said leisurely, "Of course, if junior martial brother Jiang wants to accompany junior martial sister Yi, I can't do anything about it. How about this? We won't close the entrance to the underground palace. You two can come in after junior martial sister Yi wakes up. What do you think?" His words sounded pleasant, but only he knew what the situation inside the underground palace was like. So many people were gathered here to look for treasures, but the two of them were left here. Once they entered the underground palace, what were their chances of survival? Mo Tiange sneered inwardly. This Ren Yufeng was really shameless, he even plotted against her. When her injuries were healed, she definitely had to get even with him. Jiang Shanghong remained silent, but Mo Tiange could imagine the struggle in his heart. He longed to become stronger, longed to make a realm breakthrough, and treasure hunting was very important to him. He was really unwilling to give it up. In fact, even if Jiang Shanghong didn't stay, Mo Tiange wouldn't be worried. Her injuries weren't serious, so she could get up at any time. However, she still hoped Jiang Shanghong would stay. Chapter 181. This world was very cruel. Mo Tiange had never been naive enough to hope that there would be kind-hearted people everywhere who would help her. Jiang Shanghong wasn't a good person, but 17 years ago, he helped her and saved her from falling into that miserable situation. Just like he said, they were once friends who had gone through life and death together. She still hoped that such a person would be the same Jiang Shanghong from back then, and not just act for his own benefit. Silence. Jiang Shanghong didn't say anything, and neither did the others. The current situation was very obvious. Jiang Shanghong had to make a choice, to abandon Mo Tiange or to save her. No one spoke for a long time. Mo Tiange didn't know how much time had passed when she finally heard a rather timid voice. Senior Marshal Brother Ren, this isn't good, right? Judging from the voice, it was Tang Fong. This still very immature youth summoned up his courage and said, "In the end, Junior Marshal Sister Yi is a disciple of a friendly sect. We, Junior Brother Tang." When Ren Yufeng spoke to Tang Fong, his tone was completely different. She didn't know what Tang Fong's identity was, but Ren Yufeng, a person who thought highly of himself, was actually being so polite to him and even seemed to be trying to curry favor with him. "You're inexperienced, so you don't understand the relationship here. We're indeed friends with Xianxia School, but we can't care about that now that we're in a critical situation. During the demonic beast riot more than 10 years ago, although our 7 great cultivation groups were on friendly terms in Kunwo, there were still conflicts and even mutual robberies. What was all this for? Benefits. Benefits were the most important. Besides, we didn't do anything to Junior Marshal Sister Yi. It's just that it's inconvenient to bring her along, Junior Marshal Brother Tang. Think about it. Junior Marshal Sister Yi is currently half dead. If we bring her along, how are we supposed to search for treasures?" Tang Fong didn't know what to say. Junior Marshal Brother Jiang, Ren Yufeng spoke again. This time, there was a threatening tone in his words. "You have to make a decision quickly. If you're late, we won't be able to wait." Before long, Mo Tiange felt Jiang Shanghong's hand finally calm down. He said faintly, "Senior Marshal Brother Ren, I'd better stay here and look after Junior Marshal Sister Yi. I brought her here, so I naturally have to take her back safely." Ren Yufeng let out a cold, "Th. All right, then we don't need to say anything more. Junior brothers and sisters, let's go." Afterward, she sensed spiritual aura fluctuations. Presumably, they were opening the entrance to the underground palace. Soon after, she heard footsteps moving further and further away. Aside from Mo Tiange and Jiang Shanghong, there was no one else at the scene. Jiang Shanghong dejectedly sat down and held his head. Mo Tiange opened her eyes and slowly sat up. Senior Marshal Brother Jiang. Jiang Shanghong abruptly raised his head. He was startled. "Junior Marshal Brother Yu, my injuries aren't that serious." She smiled and then put on a serious expression. "This matter?" "Thank you, Senior Marshal Brother Jiang." Jiang Shanghong naturally knew what she was thanking him for. At this moment, he was surprised and happy, but he also felt dispirited and regretful. His heart was filled with a myriad of complicated feelings. In the end, he just forced a smile and said, "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, I'm sorry. I promised you so much, but in the end, this has nothing to do with Senior Marshal Brother Jiang. I'm very touched that Senior Marshal Brother Jiang gave up the opportunity to enter the underground palace with them for me. However, doesn't Senior Brother Jiang regret it?" Jiang Shanghong smiled bitterly. "I regret it a little, but between Junior Marshal Brother Yi and that Senior Marshal Brother Ren, I still believe Junior Marshal Brother Yi a bit. That Senior Marshal Brother Ren usually treats his fellow disciples very harshly, but now that he plotted against Junior Marshal Brother Yi, I think with his personality, he definitely won't give me many things when the time comes, so it'd be better if I didn't enter. Maybe Junior Marshal Brother Yi will give me some treasures to thank me." What he said was true, but it was also a way to seek joy in the midst of suffering. Mo Tiange was now no longer angry with Jiang Shanghong, so she smiled and said, "Why not?" Jiang Shanghong turned to look at her. "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, do you really want to give me a treasure?" Mo Tiange smiled mysteriously. "Ren Yufeng plotted against me, so I'm afraid there's something good inside. Since he's heartless, I'll also be unjust. Let's go rob him." She spoke casually, but Jiang Shanghong was hesitant. "Junior Marshal Brother Yi, I know you're different from before, but Senior Martial Brother Ren and the others are also weak, and they have a lot of people. We won't be able to defeat them if we fight. Besides, I'm a disciple of Zhengfa sect, so going against them is indeed a bit. Tiange raised her eyebrows. What's there to be afraid of? If we can't do it in the open, we'll do it in the dark. Your two senior martial brothers are injured, so there's nothing to worry about. Aside from that Ren Yufeng, who I don't know what tricks he has, I don't think the others are difficult to deal with. If Junior Martial Brother Jiang, you're afraid of being blamed by the group when you go back, we'll just kill them all. At that time, we'll do whatever you say. Jiang Shanghong was gobsmacked. Junior Martial Brother Yi, if people don't offend me, I won't offend them. We'll talk about the others later, but I must kill Ren Yufeng. If I hadn't been careful and wasn't seriously injured, I would have been half dead because of his scheme just now. He even wanted to leave me here to fend for myself. As she spoke, Tiange looked at Jiang Shanghong. Senior Martial Brother Jiang, in the past, you were also a decisive person when it came to killing. Why are you so hesitant today? Jiang Shanghong was stunned and fell silent. That's right. When he was in Yunwu sect, he was pushed aside by everyone, so his personality wasn't like this. When Jiang Chengxian bullied him, he endured it, but now that he had the opportunity, he killed Jiang Chengxian without the slightest hesitation and fled Mount Yunwu. However, when he arrived in the northernmost region, he became an immortal master of a tribe and was worshipped by all the mortals in the tribe. He also became an official disciple of one of the Celestial Pole's 7 great cultivation groups and was no longer bullied as he had been before. Thus, he began to carefully protect the people in front of him. Ren Yufeng was arrogant, but he accepted it. Ren Yufeng was arrogant, but he also tolerated it. Unlike when he was in Yunwu sect, where it was practically impossible for him to survive, he no longer had the decisiveness he once had. He was more open-minded and broad-minded than before, but he had also lost his former sharpness. Thinking up to this point, Jiang Shanghong slowly exhaled. He then said sincerely, "Thank you for the reminder, Junior Martial Brother Yi." It wasn't too late for him to know now. He had to constantly adjust the direction he was advancing in. In the past, he had been trapped by hatred. Now, he had walked out of it. Now, he had lost his resolve. In the future, he would remind himself. All right, Junior Martial Brother Yi, I don't care if you want to kill Senior Martial Brother Ren. However, I hope you can let Junior Martial Brother Tang Fong go. I have a good relationship with him, and his temperament is also very simple. He's not a bad person. Just now, Tang Fong even interceded on her behalf, so Tiange remembered his kindness. She immediately nodded and said, I only want to kill Ren Yufeng. It'll be fine as long as the others don't provoke me. Jiang Shanghong finally felt relieved. A hint of a smile finally appeared on his face. That's good. Junior Martial Brother Yi, we're bound together now, and I still want to stay in Zhengfa sect. If you only want to kill Senior Martial Brother Ren, I'll naturally have a way to escape punishment. However, the others are my fellow disciples after all. I understand. Senior Martial Brother Jiang was willing to stay just now, so I'll remember this kindness. I naturally won't make things difficult for Senior Martial Brother Jiang. Once she finished speaking, Tiange stood up and scanned her surroundings. There was now a transporting formation at the place where they activated the restriction just now. Tiange muttered to herself for a moment, then asked, Senior Martial Brother Jiang, if we need to activate the restriction to enter the Divine Dragon Monument, how did they lure that water carp beast out just now? Jiang Shanghong said, this was actually that water carp beast's special ability. I don't know if it mutated or if it obtained some fated chance, but it unexpectedly ignored the restriction laid by our nascent soul seniors. Fortunately, it couldn't penetrate the special terrain of this land of hiding dragon, so we were able to escape. When we left last time, Senior Martial Brother Ren tore off its scales. He probably used those scales to lure it out. Tiange's heart was moved. Demonic beasts didn't have magic weapons, so its special ability might be attached to its body. That being the case, could the carcass of that water carp beast be made into a magic weapon that could pass through restrictions? Junior Martial Brother Yi. Jiang Shanghong was somewhat hesitant as he stared at the restriction. I'm guessing it must be quite dangerous inside. Do we really want to go in? Of course we want to go in. Why wouldn't we? Mo Tiange, who originally didn't have much interest in this so-called underground palace in the land of Hiding Dragon, was now very determined. For no other reason than Ren Yufeng plotted against her like this, she had to get revenge. All right. Jiang Shanghong nodded and made up his mind. Nothing ventured, nothing gained. If we want fated chances, we have to take risks. Back then, when he was still in Yunwu sect, he didn't care about this kind of thing at all. In recent years, his smooth life had really worn away his drive. Junior Martial Brother Yi. Before entering the transporting formation, Jiang Shanghong asked, "Are your injuries really okay?" Of course. This is all thanks to Senior Martial Brother Jiang's medicinal pills. If it weren't for them, I wouldn't have recovered so quickly. The medicinal pills Jiang Shanghong gave her were even more effective than green amplifying pills. Green amplifying pills were Danding School's Yu Clan's heirloom medicinal pills. When she was still in Yu Clan, Clan Master Yu gave her a whole bottle to thank her. In Mo Tiange's eyes, green amplifying pills were already excellent healing medicinal pills for people before they reached the nascent soul realm. However, the medicinal pills Jiang Shanghong gave her were even more effective than green amplifying pills. She just didn't know what kind of spiritual pill it was. Jiang Shanghong didn't say anything, and Mo Tiange also didn't ask. The two of them stepped into the transporting formation. With a flash of light, they entered another place. As soon as they entered, Mo Tiange was immediately shocked. This aura, she was surrounded by dusky seawater, which was completely different from the dark blue outside. It was gloomy, depressing, and desolate. She was surrounded by an aura that was majestic and sacred, vast and silent, as if it came from ancient times, carrying the loneliness and vastness of eternity. Inside this aura, Mo Tiange felt as if she had returned to ancient times, when wind and clouds gathered, spiritual beasts gathered, and cultivators roamed freely, that distant era, that ancient aura, that kind of sacred coercion. Divine Dragon's Breath. No wonder it was called Divine Dragon's Breath. Mo Tiange couldn't imagine any other name more appropriate than Divine Dragon's Breath. She raised her head and saw a tall stone tablet standing in the middle of the open space. A vivid divine dragon was painted in the center of the tablet, and numerous characters were engraved all around it. The engravings were still clear, but the dark color on the surface showed that it had experienced a very long time. This was the divine dragon tablet that had been passed down for several thousand years in Zhengfa sect. Mo Tiange walked forward. She couldn't help but want to touch it. Junior Martial Brother Yi, don't. The moment her palm touched the divine dragon tablet, the divine dragon's breath surged, gathered together, and suddenly bounced back. Mo Tiange felt pain in her palm. In an instant, her whole body was thrown out, and she didn't have the slightest ability to resist. Junior Martial Brother Yi. Jiang Shanghong hastily ran over to help her up. This divine dragon tablet can't be moved. If it's not moved, it won't hurt anyone. Mo Tiange stood up and looked at her palm. There weren't any marks on it, but the pain from just now was still there. She was inwardly frightened. This divine dragon's breath was so powerful that she couldn't resist at all, but it didn't hurt her at all. I'm not alone, so the efficiency is very low. I'll continue after I wake up. Chapter 182. Foundation building cultivators were considered good cultivators in the current cultivation world, but in ancient times, when great cultivators roamed freely, they were no different from ants. Mo Tiange stared at the divine dragon monument in front of her. For the first time, she felt she was so small that she was nothing more than a drop of water in this vast ocean. The ocean was so vast that she would disappear in the water with just a wave. This was the spiritual aura pressure of an ancient divine beast, although it was only a little bit of its aura. Not to mention foundation building cultivators, even nascent soul cultivators couldn't resist this kind of spiritual aura pressure. Junior Martial Brother Yi. Upon hearing Jiang Shanghong's voice, Mo Tiange regained her composure and said with a sigh, "No wonder it's called the Divine Dragon's Breath." "It's so powerful," Jiang Shanghong said, If junior martial brother Yi enters the underground palace, you'll find that the divine dragon's breath inside is even more powerful. An even more powerful divine dragon's breath. Mo Tiange muttered. An even more powerful divine dragon's breath proved that the underground palace wasn't an ordinary place. It might even be extremely dangerous. What kind of treasure could make Ren Yufeng plot against her before even entering? Forget it. I won't think about it anymore. Let's go inside first. Mo Tiange looked around and asked Jiang Shanghong, senior martial brother Jiang, where's the entrance to the underground palace? Jiang Shanghong led her around the divine dragon monument and saw a dark hole on the flat ground. If one didn't pay attention, they might think it was a hole dug by some undersea fish and shrimp. Here. Jiang Shanghong said, this hole definitely wasn't opened with a real technique. Maybe it was attracted by the same divine dragon's breath here, so it was exposed. Many secret places were hidden and unknown in the beginning, but nothing could resist the passage of time. Slowly, the original power would fade away, and this underground palace was probably the same. The two of them checked their belongings. Once they were ready, Jiang Shanghong walked in front and they slowly sank into the entrance of the underground palace. The dark space and narrow stone passage were no different from the underground palace on land. As soon as they entered the underground palace, their minds went blank for a moment because the aura of the divine dragon was even denser. This kind of sacred and boundless aura, which carried with it an ancient pressure, caused little cultivators like them to tremble with fear. After silently adjusting her breath for a while, Mo Tiange finally calmed down. Even under the effect of the soul-refining art, she still felt deeply awed. Jiang Shanghong had the same expression on his face. He said softly, "Junior martial brother Yi, be careful. This path isn't the correct entrance. There might be a trap." Mo Tiange asked, "Where did you go last time?" "Last time, apart from senior martial brother Ren, we only made it this far." As they spoke, they passed through the long stone path and entered a stone room. This stone chamber was extremely high, deep, and vast. There was no longer any light from the entrance, and they could not see the end of it with only a few moonstones. There was nothing else in the stone room. It did not look like a hall, nor did it look like a hall. It seemed to be just a slightly wider stone path. Turns out that water carp beast lived here. I wonder how many years it's been here, Jiang Shanghong said as he slowly swam to the four walls to examine them. Mo Tiange said, based on the appearance of this stone room, it's at least 10,000 years old. That water carp beast was only in the 5th rank. No matter how long it lived, it couldn't have lived for more than 10,000 years, right? Jiang Shanghong was startled, but he soon nodded. That's right. Could it be that the water carp beast isn't from the underground palace? It's possible. Didn't you say it completely disregarded the restrictions around the divine dragon monument? The two of them glanced at each other and were silent again. If the water carp beast wasn't the spiritual beast guarding this underground palace, then this underground palace either didn't have any spiritual beast guarding it, or it was much more dangerous than the water carp beast. If it was the former, it would be easy to deal with. They only needed to keep moving forward and kill Ren Yufeng. But if it was the latter, it wasn't a place foundation-building cultivators like them could barge into. They would instead lose their lives for nothing. The two of them pondered for a while. Jiang Shanghong was the first one who couldn't help but ask, "Junior martial brother Yi, what do you think about this matter?" Mo Tiange muttered to herself and said slowly, "In fact, there's nothing to be afraid of. The 8 of them are walking in the front. If there's any danger, we can just retreat quickly. Wouldn't that be fine?" In fact, what she was thinking was that they wouldn't have no time to enter the virtual sky world, right? Jiang Shanghong's cultivation level was lower than hers, so she had several ways to knock him out in an instant then bring him into the virtual sky world. Jiang Shanghong hesitated for a moment but eventually nodded. "You're right. Then should we follow them? And we'll walk for a while first. If we're sure there's no danger, we'll go somewhere else." Jiang Shanghong nodded in agreement. The two of them set off again. This indeed wasn't a stone room, it was a spacious stone path. This stone path was very long. They walked slowly for a long time, but they still hadn't reached the end. Fortunately, There were traces left by the 8 people ahead of them along the way. They didn't dare to use their fleeing technique. First, they were afraid they'd be discovered by the other 8 people. Second, they were worried there might be some dangers along the way. Judging from the traces along the way, the 8 people ahead of them also went through several battles, but their opponents weren't demonic beasts. Instead, they seemed to have encountered some traps and the path had collapsed. Fortunately, with these people leading the way, Immortal and Xianxia didn't encounter any danger along the way. After walking in silence for a while, they finally entered a large hall. The tall, heavy stone door was half open. There were dragon patterns engraved on it that looked like the divine dragon monument. After stepping through the door, they saw towering stone pillars supporting the entire hall. The floor was covered with neat stone slabs, all of which were painted with the same shape of a dragon. As they slowly walked inside, a towering stone statue gradually appeared in the darkness. Antlers, bull's horns, camel's head, rabbit's eyes, snake's neck, sea serpent's belly, fish's scales, and eagle's claws. Its imposing manner was vast, as if it could reach the sky. Divine dragon statue. There was actually a divine dragon statue enshrined in this hall. Immortal and Xianxia glanced at each other. Both of them were speechless. The imposing manner of this divine dragon statue was even stronger than the divine dragon monument. This kind of spiritual aura pressure almost made them speechless. Immortal took a deep breath and said, "This isn't an ordinary place." Xianxia nodded with a pale face. The two of them retreated almost to the door before the spiritual aura pressure lessened. After a moment of silence, Immortal suddenly said, "Senior Martial Brother Jiang, in your opinion, what kind of place is this?" Xianxia turned to look at her, puzzled. "Junior Martial Brother Yi, what do you mean?" Immortal turned sideways and pointed at the shallow carvings on the back of the stone door. "Look what's carved here?" Filled with doubts, Xianxia walked closer to take a closer look. This is just a very ordinary mural. If it's a relic from tens of thousands of years ago, it wouldn't be strange to have these things. "Yes, but take a look. What's carved on it?" Xianxia turned to take a look. After a while, he was shocked. "This is a sacrificial scene from millions of years ago," Immortal said faintly. "This might be a sacrificial temple from ancient times." According to legend, sacrificial temples in ancient times were built to look like palaces. Although this underground palace was crude, it was indeed a magnificent palace upon closer inspection. The wide stone path might be the passage leading to the real temple. These stone walls were engraved with murals, but there were very few words on them. Because writing had just been invented in that era, people were used to recording events with murals. On this mural, there was a tall altar with several priests standing on it. They were all wearing white robes, and below them were kneeling men and women. They were all wrapped in plain animal skins. Only ancient humans would wear animal skins. Millions of years. Xianxia's complexion was slightly pale. In the end, he asked, "Could a relic from millions of years ago exist until now? Why would it be in the sea?" Immortal smiled and said, "Senior Martial Brother Jiang, there's an old saying, white clouds turn into gray dogs, the blue sea turns into mulberry fields. After millions of years, the blue sea of the past has already turned into mulberry fields. The former sacrificial temple might have also been buried in the sea. Maybe it's because it sank into the sea that no one visited it for millions of years, allowing it to be preserved until now." As they stroked the rough stone wall and silently felt this distant time, the two of them were speechless for a while. Millions of years. Then there's no treasure left in this underground palace. Xianxia murmured. Disappointment flashed across his eyes. After millions of years, any magic weapon would lose its effect. Don't think magic weapons and medicinal pills could really be preserved forever. That was simply impossible. Correct. Immortal wasn't disappointed. She originally didn't go for the treasure. After thinking for a while, she frowned and said, "No, there's a treasure here." Xianxia raised his head, puzzled. "What?" Immortal looked at him with a smile. "Ren Yufeng went through untold hardships to come here and even scheme to harm me. How could there be no benefits? If this was the sacrificial temple from millions of years ago, it indeed wouldn't have any magic weapons or spiritual pills, but it has divine dragon's breath. Divine dragon's breath that's even stronger than the divine dragon monument. Upon hearing what she said, Jiang Shanghong's complexion gradually turned pale. Divine dragon's breath. Does he want to die? How could insignificant foundation-building cultivators like them covet such a formidable power? Not to mention them, even nascent soul cultivators wouldn't dare to covet this kind of mysterious power that came from ancient times. After all, absorbing power that one couldn't control would result in one's body exploding and one's death. Maybe he has some kind of secret technique. Mo Tiange frowned and pondered. It's impossible for Ren Yufeng not to know what we already know. He plotted all these things and showed this attitude, which means his ambition isn't small. Aside from divine dragon's breath, what else can satisfy his requirements? Jiang Shanghong didn't say anything else. This matter had already surpassed his imagination. He never thought Ren Yufeng would have this kind of idea, and he also didn't know what to do next. He naturally came to this underground palace to look for treasures, but not only were there no treasures in front of him, but there might even be a calamity. Junior Marshal Brother Yi, Jiang Shanghong said after a long silence, since there aren't any treasures, should we go back? Mo Tiange also became hesitant when she heard this. She wanted to kill Ren Yufeng, but she didn't want to lose her life. Who knew what method Ren Yufeng would use? If he succeeded and possessed divine dragon's breath, his cultivation level would definitely increase greatly. At that time, whether she could defeat him or not would be a problem. If he didn't succeed and his body exploded, would his method have any other effects? What if he implicated her? The two of them looked at each other and pondered for a long time, but neither of them could come to a decision. Chapter 183. While the two of them were still thinking about their escape route, they heard a loud rumble coming from inside. Then there was a strong spiritual aura fluctuation. Mo Tiange and Jiang Shanghong glanced at each other. Such a violent spiritual aura fluctuation, what happened? In the next moment, the aura filling the Divine Dragon Palace suddenly became turbulent and surged towards the back as if it had a mind of its own. At first, this phenomenon was slow. They only felt the Divine Dragon's breath slowly flowing towards the Divine Dragon statue, but later, it became faster and faster as if something was sucking it away. The two of them became more and more surprised. They were sure something had happened, but they didn't know what to do. At the end of this stone passage was the main hall worshipping the Divine Dragon. There was no other way, something must have happened behind the Divine Dragon Palace. However, the pressure from the Divine Dragon's breath was too great in this underground palace. They couldn't spread their divine sense at all, so they could only go to the end of the hall to see what was going on. But with such a strange phenomenon in front of them, they didn't know whether they would be in danger if they went there themselves. They didn't have time to think too much. Suddenly, they heard a heavy noise coming from the depths of the hall, as if a stone door had been knocked open. Then they heard chaotic footsteps mixed with urgent shouts. "Quick, let's go!" This voice, the two of them turned around and bumped into several people who were running out in a hurry. Junior Marshal Brother Tang. Senior Marshal Brother Jiang. Jiang Shanghong and Tang Fong looked at each other in a daze. Soon after, Tang Fong ran over, pulled Jiang Shanghong's hand and ran outside. Senior Marshal Brother Jiang, let's go. Mo Tiange swept her gaze over them. There were only 4 Zhengfa sect cultivators running out from behind the Divine Dragon Palace. Tang Fong, Yu Xiaoran, Qiu Zhiming, and Xiahou Yuan. The 4 of them looked flustered and pale, and Yu Xiaoran was even injured. The other 4 people were nowhere to be seen. As soon as they came out, Tang Fong pulled Jiang Shanghong and ran with all his might. Mo Tiange could only run with him. Zhengfa sect cultivators were very fast when using the water-escaping technique. Even with the cloud-treading boots, Mo Tiange still found it difficult to keep up. Junior Marshal Brother Tang, what's wrong? Where are Senior Marshal Brother Ren and the others? Why are we running? What happened? Jiang Shanghong asked as he ran. Tang Fong gasped for breath. Senior Brother Ren, he, Before Tang Fong finished speaking, Qiu Zhiming shouted angrily, "You're still calling him senior apprentice brother Ren. He's clearly plotting against us from the beginning to the end." Jiang Shanghong was startled. "What? Senior brother Ren also?" Qiu Zhiming supported the injured Yu Xiaoran and pointed at the wound on Yu Xiaoran's chest. "This was done by senior brother Ren. There are no treasures here at all. He used us to enter this underground palace, inherited the divine dragon's breath, and then killed us." "What?" Jiang Shanghong was astonished. Although he had already guessed this, he thought the possibility was zero. She never expected Ren Yufeng to really think this way. "Does he want to die? Even our nascent soul grandmasters don't dare to offend that divine dragon breath, but he." The one who interrupted was Xiahou Yuan. She was also very angry. "Actually, he obtained a secret technique from here last time. He can use the aura of an ancient divine beast to modify his body so that he has the inheritance of a divine beast. After obtaining this secret technique, he prepared himself well and used us to enter this underground palace. Now that he's done, he still wants to kill us." Emo Tiange wasn't surprised to hear what Xiahou Yuan said. Just now, she and Jiang Shanghong discussed this matter. Ren Yufeng must have had some kind of secret technique, which was why he wanted to obtain the divine dragon's breath. What Xiahou Yuan said just verified this theory. Then what about senior martial brother Lu and the others? Tang Fong looked sad. Senior martial brother Lu and senior martial brother Xiang used up all their spiritual aura and were injured by the water carp beast when they were in charge of the formation. They couldn't run away, so they were killed by senior martial brother Ren right away. Senior martial sister AI was always close to senior martial brother Ren, but I never thought he'd also kill senior martial sister AI. What about now? Upon hearing what they said, Jiang Shanghong nervously turned to look behind him. Ren Yufeng didn't chase after them. Senior martial brother Ren's already in the late stage of the foundation building realm, and he still has more than 100 years left in his lifespan. He obviously has a chance to advance to the core formation realm, so why did he do this kind of thing? Who knows? Qiu Zhiming said coldly, "I found it strange from the beginning. Why didn't he look for late-stage foundation-building cultivators he had a good relationship with and instead looked for us? I originally thought he just wanted to take advantage of us, but I never expected he actually had this idea." The difference between the late stage of the foundation-building realm and the early stage of the foundation-building realm was quite big. During the demonic beast riot that year, there was friction between disciples of Xianxing School and Gujian sect at Qianmen Ridge in Mount Tianhua. Because of Kuang Zhu, a late-stage foundation-building cultivator, those Gujian sect disciples didn't dare to act rashly. Later, it was because Wan Hangan, who harbored malicious intentions, instigated them to prepare a sword formation that they finally fought. However, once Kuang Zhu made his move, he dealt with the heavy matter as if it were light, so the victory was in their favor. Ren Yufeng was in the late stage of the foundation-building realm. Aside from him, Lu and Xiang, Emo Tiange, and the remaining 6 were in the early stage of the foundation-building realm. If 3 middle-stage foundation-building cultivators joined hands, they could still win against a late-stage foundation-building cultivator, but 6 early-stage foundation-building cultivators couldn't defeat a single late-stage foundation-building cultivator. Judging from this, Ren Yufeng had planned everything from the beginning. Among the 3 middle-stage foundation-building cultivators, he let Lu Rongxing and Xiang Jiang preside over the formation and crippled 2 of them. He also schemed against Emo Tiange when they opened the restrictions on the Divine Dragon Monument, so none of the 3 middle-stage foundation-building cultivators could oppose him. The remaining 6 early-stage foundation-building cultivators couldn't defeat him, so once they entered the underground palace under the Divine Dragon Monument, Ren Yufeng would have the final say. Emo Tiange sneered in her heart. She didn't sympathize with this group of Zhengfa sect cultivators because when Ren Yufeng schemed against her, they all looked on with folded arms. However, now that they had a falling out with Ren Yufeng, she could join hands with them. Senior martial brother Jiang. She secretly sent Jiang Shanghong a voice transmission. Ask them what's the situation now and how's Ren Yufeng. Jiang Shanghong nodded imperceptibly, then continued to ask, "How's senior martial brother Ren now? Did he really obtain the divine dragon's breath? Can we escape?" "I don't know." The one who answered was still Qiu Zhiming. "We followed him all the way into this underground palace and into the divine dragon palace. When we arrived at the dragon bone altar in the back, we saw a dragon skeleton." At this time, Ren Yufeng suddenly burst into laughter. He said he finally saw the dragon skeleton and that he wanted to obtain the divine dragon's breath to become the divine dragon's son. Then he used some kind of secret technique and the divine dragon's breath on the dragon skeleton really rushed towards him. Senior martial brother Lu was shocked and asked him what was going on. Ren Yufeng proudly said that last time he entered this underground palace alone, he obtained a stone tablet outside the divine dragon palace and discovered the mural that was carved with the inheritance of the divine dragon's breath, so he was tempted. In these past few months, he completely comprehended the mural, so he asked us to help him enter this divine dragon palace again so he could carry out the divine dragon's secret technique. Mo Tiange and Jiang Shanghong glanced at each other. In fact, they'd already guessed some things, but they still didn't expect Ren Yufeng to be this ruthless. Bringing them in was basically to silence all of them. However, in other words, the divine dragon's breath was really the divine dragon's breath? There were even dragon bones here. Could it be that dragons really existed? The breath left behind by the legendary king of spiritual beasts, the race closest to the gods, was already so powerful. How powerful would a real dragon be? What was going on with this sacrificial temple? Could it be that it was the burial place of ancient dragons? Qiu Zhiming continued. Senior martial brother Lu asked him if he was just using us. Ren Yufeng was furious and said he'd already inherited the divine dragon's breath, so he was no longer a human and was about to become a divine beast, but senior martial brother Lu actually dared to talk to him like that. Then, he killed senior martial brother Lu. At this point, anger appeared in Qiu Zhiming's eyes. We were all shocked when he killed senior martial brother Lu. Junior martial sister Ai asked him one more thing, and senior martial brother Xiang also asked him why he hurt his fellow disciples, so he killed both junior martial sister Ai and senior martial brother Xiang. Upon hearing this, Mo Tiange and Jiang Shanghong exchanged glances. It seemed this Ren Yufeng was completely deranged. He actually did this to his own sect. Although the cultivation world was a realistic place, they were, after all, part of the righteous path, a Dao sect, so there were still sect rules that forbade people from attacking each other. This Ren Yufeng actually ignored the sect rules. Could it be that after obtaining the divine dragon's breath, he no longer needed to stay in Zhengfa sect? Or perhaps he was certain they couldn't escape. When she thought of the latter possibility, Mo Tiange couldn't help but feel a chill run down her spine. If it was the original Ren Yufeng, she still had a certain degree of confidence. With so many treasures, it wouldn't be a problem for her to fight against a late-stage foundation-building cultivator. But how strong would Ren Yufeng, who was said to have obtained the divine dragon's breath, be? She had no idea. Jiang Shanghong asked the question she wanted to know. Is senior martial brother Ren very strong now? Qiu Zhiming was silent. The one who answered was Tang Fong. Senior martial brother Ren is very scary now. After he killed senior martial brother Lu, senior martial brother Xiang, and senior martial sister Ai, we realized something was wrong. He was indeed stronger than before, so we hastily fled. Senior martial brother Ren seemed to want to chase us, but he stopped before he could absorb the divine dragon's breath. Therefore, we also don't know how strong he is now. However, the divine dragon's breath is so powerful, it definitely can't be weak. What Tang Fong said made Mo Tiange feel very uneasy. Ren Yufeng really had a way to absorb the divine dragon's breath, but they all knew how powerful the divine dragon's breath was. If he really withstood the backlash of this powerful force, how strong would he become? Even if it was impossible for him to advance to the nascent soul realm in one go, it was very possible for him, who was originally in the late stage of the foundation-building realm, to enter the core formation realm in one go after he obtained the divine dragon's breath. Mo Tiange believed she could contend with a 5th-ranked demonic beast, and she could even escape if she had the virtual sky world, but she absolutely couldn't resist a core formation cultivator. This was because humans had intelligence that demonic beasts did not have. Under a relatively equal level of intelligence, strength was enough to determine the outcome. No matter how many treasures she had, it was useless. In the face of strength that was strong enough, tricks were also useless. Her thoughts turned at lightning speed, and she already had the idea of escaping. The simplest method was to enter the virtual sky world, but if she did that, how could she avoid the eyes and ears of the people in front of her? Besides, she didn't care about the others, but she at least wanted to protect Jiang Shanghang. Chapter 184. The six of them ran like crazy, but this underground palace was too big. They'd been here for half a day, so how could they escape in a short time? At the same time, all the divine dragon's breath in the underground palace rushed towards the divine dragon palace. Emotienga cast a glance behind her. The pitch-black passage was peaceful, only the faint light from the moonstones they carried was visible. However, this tranquility contained a spiritual aura pressure that made her tremble with fear. The divine dragon's breath was gradually fading, and the pressure it brought was also fading, but the 6 people present were even more afraid. Because the fading divine dragon's breath was all on one person, and they didn't know what would happen to that person after obtaining the dragon's breath. As they ran, they suddenly heard a deafening roar. The water surged and the underground palace shook. The expressions of the 6 people changed dramatically. The roar was deep and unclear, but they could hear the majesty in it. The might of the divine dragon. Could it be that Ren Yufeng really succeeded? Senior martial brothers. Tang Fong called out with an ugly expression. What should we do? Qiu Zhiming looked bitter. We can only run for our lives. I hope that Ren Yufeng hasn't finished yet so we can run back to the sect to report. Then he looked at Yu Xiaoran, who he was half-dragging, with a pained expression. Junior martial brother Yu's injuries are very serious. I'll take him with me. The rest of you should use your abilities to run for your lives as quickly as possible. Senior martial brother Qiu. Tang Fong's expression changed. You mean, one of us has to run back to the sect to report, otherwise, we'll all die here. Senior martial brother Qiu is right. Xiao Yuan's gaze was stern. Junior martial brother Tang. Don't be so wishy-washy. Right now, saving our lives is more important. Tang Fong's gaze darkened. He clenched his teeth and nodded. All right, we'll run for our lives separately. Whoever can escape will go back to the sect to report, but if we can't, then we'll consider ourselves unlucky, Jiang Shanghang said with a ruthless expression. Jiang Shanghang said with a ruthless expression on his face, once we leave this underground palace, we'll split up and run for our lives. That way, our chances of escaping will be a bit higher than running together. Apart from this, there was no other way. Emotienga was silent as she listened to their conversation. They were all disciples of Zhengfa sect, so there was still affection between them. For example, Qiu Zhiming was willing to take Yu Xiaoran with him to escape, even though that would greatly reduce his speed. However, she wasn't a disciple of Zhengfa sect, so she only met these people by chance, so she could only take care of herself. Junior martial brother Yi. When Jiang Shanghang saw her, he hesitated for a moment and said, You? Emotienga knew she couldn't match Zhengfa sect cultivator's water-escaping technique underwater. The reason she was able to keep up with them now was partly because the power of her cloud-treading boots was extraordinary and partly because Yu Xiaoran was injured, which slowed down their speed. Don't worry, senior martial brother Jiang, Emotienga said faintly, although my fleeing technique isn't good, I still have some life-saving methods. She originally planned to find an opportunity to knock Jiang Shanghang unconscious and bring him into the virtual sky world, which could also be considered as repaying him for staying behind to protect her life. But now, they already had other countermeasures, so it wasn't worthwhile for her to do that. After all, her trust in Jiang Shanghang hadn't reached the point where she would do everything she could to ensure his survival. Jiang Shanghang's gaze wavered for a moment, but in the end he still clenched his teeth and said, Then, let's leave it to fate. If we're fated, we'll meet again in the future. Mo Tiange nodded, but she couldn't help but sigh inwardly. In all these years, there weren't many people she could trust. Before she was 20, there was only her second uncle, and after she was 20, there were only a few people in Xianxia school. Other people she met by chance might temporarily team up with, but in the end, they didn't trust each other wholeheartedly. She originally felt the same towards Jiang Shanghong. She was even angry that he concealed his real purpose for coming here. But when he was willing to give up the chance to search for treasures and stay to look after her, she felt maybe she could trust him a bit more. However, she didn't have a chance to verify it now. Let's just leave it to fate. We're all floating duckweeds under the mandate of heaven. We'll meet by chance and part with fate. As long as we're alive, we might have a chance to meet again. When they escaped from Mount Yunwu back then, they never thought they'd meet again. Alright, let's not talk nonsense. Let's split up. Qiu Zhiming shouted and took the lead to rush out of the underground palace. The others also didn't hesitate. One by one, they followed the water and escaped. Once they were out of the underground palace, they left the transporting formation on the Divine Dragon Monument. Each of them activated their water escaping technique and escaped as fast as they could. Mo Tiange saw 4 flight lights flashing in different directions and disappearing in the blink of an eye. She sighed but didn't follow them. Instead, she turned around and returned to the Divine Dragon Monument's restriction through the transporting formation. These 4 people had a natural advantage in the water, so she was destined to be left behind. If Ren Yufeng took a long time, everyone might be able to escape, but if he eventually caught up to them, the first person he would catch up to would be her. She pressed the space between her eyebrows and silently recited an incantation. The light between her eyebrows grew brighter and brighter, and after several breaths, her figure disappeared from this land of hiding dragon. She touched the space between her eyebrows, causing the bead to float out. With a stroke of her fingertip, a crack appeared in the virtual sky world, allowing her to see the situation outside. With the virtual sky world, whatever the higher-ups thought was impossible. She could hide properly inside the virtual sky world. No matter what kind of existence Ren Yufeng became, he wouldn't be able to find her. Moreover, she also wanted to see how strong Ren Yufeng would become after absorbing the so-called divine beast from the distant past era, the divine dragon's breath. The entrance to the underground palace was still open, but the divine dragon's breath coming from inside was getting weaker and weaker. In the end, even the breath from the Divine Dragon Monument also started to flow into the underground palace. It didn't take long for the Divine Dragon's breath near the monument to completely disappear. Mo Tiange stared at the entrance to the underground palace. She was now inside the virtual sky world. Although she could see the situation outside, she couldn't use her divine sense, so she didn't know whether Ren Yufeng had already chased after her or not. However, since the absorption of the divine dragon's breath had stopped, he should come out very soon. Sure enough, before long, Ren Yufeng's figure rushed out of the underground palace's entrance. The moment she saw him, Mo Tiange wrinkled her brows. She wasn't outside, so she couldn't sense Ren Yufeng's momentum at the moment. However, Ren Yufeng's appearance was completely different from before. Ren Yufeng's original appearance was that of a youth in his 20s. Although his expression made people feel uncomfortable, his face was still fair and clean. However, the Ren Yufeng in front of her now had a pitch-black face, a ferocious expression, and his whole body was emitting a black aura as if he was possessed by the devil. Upon seeing his appearance, Mo Tiange's heart thumped. Dragons were immemorial divine beasts. It was rumored that their aura was vast and righteous, and they were the race closest to gods. Whether it was the Divine Dragon Monument or the Divine Dragon statue in the underground palace, the Divine Dragon's breath was vast and sacred. However, Ren Yufeng looked like he was possessed by the devil. There wasn't a trace of the holiness of a Divine Dragon's breath on him. Mo Tiange was sure he didn't absorb the Divine Dragon's breath and became the so-called son of the Divine Dragon. What was going on? Ren Yufeng also stepped onto the transporting formation and arrived outside the Divine Dragon Monument's restriction. Mo Tiange pondered for a moment, then pressed the space between her eyebrows. She exited the virtual sky world and once again entered the underground palace. This world had existed for an unknown number of millions of years since the beginning of time. Looking at it now, these millions of years had been divided into several stages. Immemorial era, divine destruction, primordial era, present era. The creation of the primordial world, the transformation of heaven and earth, and the emergence of gods and spirits. This was the distant past era. The distant past era lasted for millions of years. In the beginning, it was a world of gods, monsters, and demons. Later, humans appeared and the gods left the human world, but spiritual beings remained. The period when monsters and humans lived together was also called the distant past era. The distant past era was a relatively special period of several 100,000 years. Humans were born there, and they slowly became the spirit of all living things. Finally, cultivators appeared. After millions of years, they gained wisdom and learned cultivation methods from monsters and spirits. Those who were close to spirits were immortals, and those who were close to demons were devils. The power of immortals and devils gradually grew stronger, and finally, a great war broke out. The gods who established the world's rules intervened, causing immortals and devils who were powerful enough to move mountains and drain seas to ascend, while monsters and spirits moved to another world. Only cultivators and devil cultivators who weren't powerful enough were left in the human world. The distant past era ended there. Divine beasts were the kings of this period. Divine beasts were the most powerful spirits. They were born with spiritual power, unlike cultivators and devil cultivators who had to cultivate to obtain magic power. Their strength was close to that of gods, stronger than both immortals and devils. They were also the source of human cultivators' cultivation techniques. Judging from the sacrificial scene in this divine dragon sacrificial temple, it should have been a time when humans hadn't appeared for a long time and hadn't cultivated immortals and devils yet. The distant past era lasted for millions of years, and the distant past era was a period of several 100,000 years, which was also the period when humans originated. During this period, gods left the human world, and divine beasts were the most powerful forces humans could come into contact with. They possessed the bloodline of gods, so they were sacred and vast. They were the most powerful kind of power among spirits. In the distant past era, divine beasts were the gods in the hearts of humans. The divine dragon's breath in the divine dragon monument and the underground palace indeed possessed the majesty and sacredness that a divine beast should have. If one really absorbed this kind of divine dragon's breath, their spiritual aura would certainly be upright and pure, and it would absolutely be impossible for it to turn black as if they were possessed. Immortals came from spirits, while devils came from monsters. There was absolutely no reason for one to become a devil by absorbing the breath of spirits. Emotienga was almost certain that Ren Yufeng's so-called method of absorbing the divine dragon's breath was definitely wrong. But why was it wrong? The secret technique that came from this divine dragon sacrificial temple definitely didn't make one a devil. Otherwise, how could this dense divine dragon's breath be explained? Spirits restrained monsters, and they also had an innate restraining power over devil cultivators. Wherever the divine dragon's breath existed, a devil-like breath shouldn't appear. Unless the breath on Ren Yufeng's body wasn't devil aura, or this wasn't the divine dragon's breath at all. Emotienga once again stepped into the divine dragon hall. Without the divine dragon's breath, this divine dragon statue also didn't have its previous spiritual aura pressure. She bypassed the divine dragon statue and stepped through the stone door that Tang Fong and the others escaped from. Although she was already mentally prepared, Emotienga was still shocked. This was a huge skeleton. Even though it had lost its life for millions of years, it still emitted a terrifying spiritual aura pressure. This was the divine dragon's bone. The consequence of not sleeping after a long journey was being confused for the whole night. I'll continue at night, so I'll go rest first and crawl slowly. Chapter 185. The huge skeleton laid quietly on the vast square, looking like a real dragon overlooking the human world. Its posture was natural, tall, and holy, as if it was alive. The white skeleton didn't change color because of millions of years. Instead, it became even more sparkling and translucent. It was as if she had seen millions of years ago, when a true divine beast was lying on the square, quietly looking down at the humans below. It had a leisurely posture and was being worshipped by humans. Every move it made was filled with the sacred majesty of a divine beast. Even now, its momentum was still overbearing. Tiange slowly approached it, looking up at the ancient divine dragon skeleton. Its momentum was still there, and its spiritual aura was also present. It was holy and vast, just like the divine dragon's breath outside, but even stronger, making it hard for her to breathe. But why did Ren Yufeng become like that? This kind of divine dragon's breath shouldn't cause people to be possessed by the devil. But aside from being possessed by the devil, how else could Ren Yufeng's appearance be explained? Could it be he used the wrong method? Before she could figure out the reason, Tiange keenly sensed a kind of murderous aura approaching. Under the pressure of the divine dragon's breath, she couldn't spread her divine sense, but this murderous aura didn't need to be sensed by divine sense to be transmitted to her very clearly. As soon as she sensed it, she immediately pressed the space between her eyebrows, launched the virtual sky world, and hid inside. This murderous aura must belong to Ren Yufeng without a doubt. Sure enough, before long, a person flew in from the entrance. It was Ren Yufeng, and he was holding two people in his hands. One was Qiu Zhiming, and the other was Xiahou Yuan. Upon seeing this, Tiange's heart relaxed. Without Jiang Shanghong, he might really have escaped. Outside the virtual sky world, Ren Yufeng grabbed the two people, threw them to the ground, and snorted coldly. Want to run? He fell heavily. Qiu Zhiming and Xiahou Yuan were suddenly thrown to the ground, and both of them screamed miserably. Judging from his momentum, Tiange guessed that Ren Yufeng's cultivation level was at least in the core formation realm. Tiange frowned as she watched the scene outside. Senior Martial Brother Ren. Xiahou Yuan crawled up. Once she saw Ren Yufeng's murderous expression, she immediately begged, Senior Martial Brother Ren, in any case, we're from the same sect. My master and martial uncle Buki also have a good relationship. Please consider our past friendship and let me go. Ren Yufeng's face, which was covered in black aura, glared at her, but a contemptuous smile appeared on his face. Let you go? Xiahou Yuan, have you forgotten how you used to laugh at me? Relying on the fact that your Xiahou clan has some status in Zhengfa sect, you secretly mocked me in front of AI Xian for being so old and having no hope of making a realm breakthrough. Don't you remember? I remember it very clearly. You. Xiahou Yuan was taken aback, then panicked. You heard me. In any case, Ren Yufeng was a late-stage foundation-building cultivator, and on the surface, his status was still higher than hers, so Xiahou Yuan definitely wouldn't say this kind of thing to his face. Right now, Xiahou Yuan was completely dumbfounded. She never expected that the person in question would actually overhear her private conversation with her sister and even wanted to settle the score with her. Ren Yufeng grinned nastily. His originally fair face was now shrouded in black aura, making his smile look even more terrifying. Before, you were a member of Xiahou clan, so I couldn't do anything to you. I could only swallow my anger, but now. He opened his hand, and a mass of black aura appeared in the hollow of his palm. Under Xiahou Yuan's horrified gaze, the black aura was lightly flung out. It was as light as a feather and didn't seem to exert any force at all. However, once Xiahou Yuan came into contact with the black aura, she suddenly let out a blood-curdling scream. Her scream was so miserable that even the current Tiange couldn't help but tremble. Xiahou Yuan was completely surrounded by the black aura. Her continuous blood-curdling screams came from inside the black aura, and the pain and misery they conveyed was unbearable to listen to. At the same time, Xiahou Yuan seemed to be unable to bear the pain and started to roll on the ground. This place was originally underwater, and because she ate bubble fruit, she had a layer of waterproof barrier around her. Now that she was surrounded by the black aura, that barrier also slowly disappeared. Tiange saw that Xiahou Yuan had lost the barrier and was now completely submerged in seawater. Her eyes, ears, mouth, and nose were all soaked by seawater, and the little bit of skin that was exposed was once again covered by the black aura. She looked like she was in unbearable pain. Mo Tiange wrinkled her brows slightly. Cultivators had a much stronger tolerance for pain compared to mortals, so they definitely wouldn't show such a painful expression. What kind of cruel thing was this in the end? What was so mysterious about this black aura? Why was it able to make a cultivator suffer so much? Qiu Zhiming was already stupefied to see such a painful expression on Xiahou Yuan's face, but Ren Yufeng actually looked pleased, as if he was enjoying the aftertaste. Xiahou Yuan went from gritting her teeth to enduring the pain to screaming at the top of her lungs. In the end, when the waterproof barrier disappeared, she actually couldn't even scream. Her ears and nose were blocked by seawater, and her face suddenly turned purple. She unconsciously grabbed her own neck, struggling in pain. After a long time, Ren Yufeng probably thought he'd enjoyed enough, so he softly withdrew the black aura. He then smiled and looked at her pitifully. "Tell me, why did you have to do this? If you didn't say anything back then, you wouldn't be like this today." Without the black aura covering her, Xiahou Yuan's whole body was exposed. She no longer had the waterproof barrier, so she was completely submerged in the water. Although she wouldn't drown, her injuries would only worsen. Presumably, this Xiahou Yuan was a young miss of a clan, so she'd never suffered before. After being tormented like this, she was already half dead. Mo Tiange watched this scene with a frown. Ren Yufeng was actually so cruel and morbidly pursuing the pleasure of torturing others, she was almost certain these two people wouldn't survive. Although she was hiding inside the virtual sky world and wouldn't be discovered by Ren Yufeng, what if he absorbed this so-called divine dragon's breath and obtained an ability she didn't understand? Based on Ren Yufeng's current behavior, he definitely wouldn't let her have an easy time. But what was going on with Ren Yufeng? His cultivation level was in the late stage of the foundation building realm, and he was also the disciple of a core formation cultivator. Even Jiang Shanghang was very satisfied with Zheng Fasek's treatment, so why was he so resentful? After tormenting Xiahou Yuan, Ren Yufeng turned to Qiu Zhiming. His expressionless gaze shifted back and forth on Qiu Zhiming's body. Qiu Zhiming's face turned pale, then red, then pale again. Based on what she saw just now, this Qiu Zhiming had a violent temper, but he was also somewhat upright. He was willing to run with the injured Yu Shaoran even though it would slow him down, and he hated Ren Yufeng's behavior very much. But Mo Tiange really couldn't guess what he would do in the end. Ren Yufeng suddenly walked towards Qiu Zhiming step by step. His steps were very slow, but they were very intimidating. In fact, because of his slowness, he was even more frightening. He seemed to enjoy this kind of frightening feeling very much, so he deliberately walked step by step very steadily. Qiu Zhiming became more and more frightened. His face became paler and paler, his lips trembled, and beads of sweat the size of beans dripped down from his forehead. Mo Tiange noticed that his breathing was already irregular, and his nostrils were opening and closing rapidly and powerlessly. Just as Ren Yufeng was about to reach him, Qiu Zhiming's knees suddenly went soft and he knelt down. His face wrinkled, and tears and snot flowed down his face. He tremblingly said, "Senior Martial Brother Ren, Senior Martial Brother Ren, I've never wronged you, please forgive me." Ren Yufeng stood motionless, looking down at him condescendingly. He didn't say anything and just watched coldly. He watched the arrogant and violent Qiu Zhiming cry in front of him until his entire face was a mess and he couldn't even breathe. It was very easy to be arrogant. When there was no threat to one's life, one could naturally assume an arrogant posture and put themselves in a pure and clean position. However, when it came to one's life, it was also very easy to let go of this arrogance. There was practically no need for any preparation. One would naturally lower their arrogant head and straighten their knees. Mo Tiange sighed softly. She knew this actually wasn't Qiu Zhiming's fault. The fact that he was willing to run away with the injured Yu Shaoran already proved that he wasn't a bad person. However, when it came to one's life, who would be able to harden their bones without any hesitation? Mo Tiange believed she also had to assess the situation before she could make a choice. For cultivators, life was too important. What was the purpose of cultivating? Of course it was to live a long life. Since it was to live a long life, life was the most important thing. Friendship, interests, and even dignity couldn't compete with it for this most important position. Ren Yufeng seemed to be very satisfied. He opened his mouth slightly, revealing a smile that seemed both mocking and pleased. Then his gaze turned cold. Qiu Zhiming, you're good at everything but you think too highly of yourself. You really haven't offended me, so I won't torture you. Upon hearing what he said, Qiu Zhiming immediately relaxed and said repeatedly, "Thank you, Senior Martial Brother Ren. Thank you, Senior Martial Brother Ren." Don't be happy too early. Ren Yufeng once again looked at him with a chilly gaze. I just wanted to say that I can let you die a little more painlessly. Qiu Zhiming's expression froze. Upon seeing Qiu Zhiming's current expression, Ren Yufeng finally couldn't help but burst into laughter. Rest assured, you and I are both mortals with no background, so I won't torture you. I'll make it so you won't feel the pain of death. Qiu Zhiming's gaze finally moved. His eyes widened, his lips tightened, and his brows furrowed. Seemingly realizing he couldn't escape in the end, he became furious. He stood up and pointed at Ren Yufeng. Senior Martial Brother Ren Yu, what about me? Ren Yufeng stopped laughing and stared at him contemptuously. I've already knelt, yet you still want to lecture me? Qiu Zhiming's face turned purple. He paused for a moment then shouted angrily, Senior Martial Brother Ren, you're obviously already in the late stage of the foundation building realm and have hopes of advancing to the core formation realm. Why are you doing this? Among us, you're the one with the highest status. Could it be because of a few gossips from junior martial sister Xiaoho? Gossips? A mocking expression appeared on Ren Yufeng's face, but in the end, his expression suddenly turned ferocious. I've had enough of gossips. What did you think I sacrificed and what did I get in return? Ever since I entered Zhengfa sect, I've been cultivating diligently and making friends with others. My aptitude isn't high, but I dare say I'm more diligent than all the other disciples. His breathing started to quicken as he paced back and forth in front of Qiu Zhiming. His expression was full of resentment. I entered Zhengfa sect when I was 10 and cultivated diligently every day and night. In the end, when I was 40, I succeeded in building my foundation. I originally thought that since I built my foundation and a core formation elder was willing to accept me as a disciple, my future would definitely be bright and no one would dare to look down on me anymore. But what happened? His voice grew louder and louder. They didn't say anything on the surface, but as I grew older and older, not a single one of them looked down on me. They said my aptitude was ordinary and I definitely wouldn't form my gold core. Although I advanced to the middle stage and the late stage, they still firmly believed in me. In the late stage, my cultivation level finally stagnated, so they became complacent and satisfied. Seeing how I cultivated every day and night to no avail, they were extremely complacent. In the end, even the master I respected the most also gave up on me. Once he finished speaking, Ren Yufeng's voice became softer, but it still carried a hint of hopeless sorrow. I'm not young anymore. I'm already 300 years old. If I don't form my gold core soon, I won't have another chance. Chapter 186. 300 years. Although Emo Tienga had long guessed that Ren Yufeng had taken look-preserving pills or a cultivation technique that had the effect of preserving his youth, she still didn't expect him to actually be 300 years old already. What kind of age was 300 years old to a foundation establishment cultivator? Early-stage foundation establishment cultivators could only live to 300 years old. Middle-stage and late-stage foundation establishment cultivators could live up to 400 years if they took good care of themselves. However, 400 years was only the upper limit. Most of them would die before reaching that age. If what Ren Yufeng said was true, he indeed wasn't young anymore. It could be said that he already had one foot in the grave. For cultivators, the younger they were, the better it was. For example, in the foundation establishment realm, the elite disciples of sects would generally be able to advance in their 30s, and the weaker ones would be able to advance in their 50s. If they still couldn't advance in their 50s, then they would be no different from ordinary disciples. As for ordinary disciples, they usually reach the foundation establishment stage before the age of 100. If they pass the age of 100, their chances of reaching the foundation establishment stage would be greatly reduced. It was the same for core formation. Before the age of 200 was the best period for core formation. After 200 years old, the difficulty of core formation would increase greatly. If Ren Yufeng was already 300 years old and his original aptitude was very ordinary, it was no wonder other people thought he couldn't form his gold core. It wasn't that there weren't cultivators who could reach core formation before 300 years old, but the probability was much lower than that of young cultivators under 200 years old. If they didn't come across a fortuitous encounter, it would be very difficult for them to break through. Once cultivators passed this period, they would be considered old. Reaching old age was the sorrow of cultivators. Ren Yufeng stared at the void in front of him, then said slowly, "Do you think I'm very arrogant because I'm proud? If I am not arrogant and proud, who will respect me? Even this woman, whose cultivation is far below mine, can look down on me." His face revealed a vicious expression as he glared at Xia Hoyuan, who was about to lose her breath. For a moment, no one spoke. Xia Hoyuan already couldn't move. Qiu Zhiming was already dumbfounded. As for Ren Yufeng, his expression was fierce, but he was also staring at the sky in loneliness. Mo Tiange quietly watched them from inside the virtual sky world. The path of cultivation was cruel. Everything was determined by one's cultivation level. No matter how much of a genius you were at the beginning, if you couldn't break through, you would be laughed at by others. However, she didn't feel the slightest bit of affection for Ren Yufeng. How could he be the only cultivator who had entered old age? Those aura-refining cultivators who were trapped in the aura-refining realm their entire lives, unable to advance even the slightest bit, and in the end, exhausted their lifespans in a little more than 100 years, were thousands of times more pitiful than him, but so what? So many people in the cultivation world had come through this way. In fact, Ren Yufeng's cultivation level was already in the late stage of the foundation building realm, and he was also accepted by a core formation cultivator as his disciple. Aside from these elite disciples who had backers, which ordinary disciple would look down on him? Just like Jiang Shanghong, he didn't dare to be disrespectful in the slightest in front of this senior martial brother Ren. There were so many people traveling with them, so Xiahou Yuan definitely wasn't the only elite disciple. So what if you gossip behind my back? If a cultivator didn't even have this bit of breadth of mind, how could he form his gold core? Ren Yufeng most likely hadn't made any progress for many years, so his mental state had long entered a demonic barrier. Even if he reached the peak stage of the foundation building realm, he still wouldn't succeed in forming his gold core. Senior brother Ren. Qiu Zhiming finally caught his breath and said, "Are you really not willing to let me go?" Ren Yufeng's cold gaze swept over him. "What else do you want to say?" Qiu Zhiming, who had lost all hope, lowered his head, looking dispirited. But after a while he seemed to feel a glimmer of hope again, so he stood up and said hurriedly, "Junior Martial Brother Tang and Junior Martial Brother Jiang already escaped. They'll definitely report this to the school. At that time, a nascent Soul Grandmaster will definitely come out to clean up the school. Senior Martial Brother Ren, even if you kill me, you won't be able to block the news." Upon hearing what he said, Mo Tiange, who was inside the virtual sky world, heaved a sigh of relief. At least Jiang Shanghong and Tang Fong escaped. "Who said I wanted to block the news?" Ren Yufeng cast him a contemptuous glance. "In a moment, I'll close the entrance to the underground palace. Once I've completely absorbed the divine dragon's breath, what can a nascent soul grandmaster do?" Qiu Zhiming was silent. He never expected Ren Yufeng to be so confident in his own strength. Ren Yufeng stretched out his hand, playing with a mass of black aura in his hand. He looked Qiu Zhiming up and down as if he was considering where to attack. Upon seeing Ren Yufeng's behavior, Qiu Zhiming's complexion became paler and paler, and he started to tremble violently. Nevertheless, Ren Yufeng didn't throw that mass of black aura out. He paused for a long time before he suddenly heaved a sigh. Junior Martial Brother Chiu, I really don't want to kill you so soon. If I kill you, nobody will talk to me anymore. What Ren Yufeng said made Qiu Zhiming's eyes brighten. Senior Martial Brother Ren, let me go. Let me go. I promise I'll listen to you. At the very least, I can keep you company. Ren Yufeng's expression didn't change. He didn't have any intention of letting him go, but he also didn't kill him right away. In the end, he withdrew the mass of black aura in his hand. Forget it, I'll keep you alive for a while. However, you shouldn't be happy too early. I'm only letting you go for now. Whenever I want to take your life, you'll still have to die. Although it was only for now, Qiu Zhiming heaved a huge sigh of relief. He said gratefully, "Thank you, Senior Martial Brother Ren, for not killing me." "Thank you, Senior Martial Brother Ren." Ren Yufeng waved his hand and said coldly, "Take care of this woman's corpse. I'm going to close the entrance to the underground palace." In the end, he said with a warning, "If you're not obedient, I'll take your life right away." Qiu Zhiming naturally promised him again and again. Ren Yufeng then turned around and left. When Ren Yufeng left his line of sight, the smile on Qiu Zhiming's face disappeared. He sat down with a lifeless expression. He just sat there expressionlessly for a while, as if he still hadn't adapted to the change in his identity. As he thought about it, he suddenly laid his head on his lap and burst into tears. A tall and strong man curled up into a ball and wailed loudly like this. It was hard to say whether this scene was funny or pitiful. Qiu Zhiming was very innocent. In fact, he didn't do anything wrong. It could even be said that he was caught by Ren Yufeng because he ran away with Yu Xiaoran. Now, only Jiang Shanghang and Tang Fang escaped, while the ones who were caught were Qiu Zhiming and Xiahou Yuan. Yu Xiaoran was most likely already dead, and he himself also couldn't escape this calamity. How much better was being alive for the time being than being dead? This was an unknown underground palace. The scenery of the land of Hiding Dragon changed every year. Things from one year couldn't be kept for the next year, so who knew where they would be next year? Not to mention next year, who knew when Ren Yufeng would suddenly be in a bad mood and want to kill him? Even if Ren Yufeng didn't kill him, this was underwater. Foundation building cultivators couldn't create a waterproof barrier on their own. Even if he was a cultivator and could survive underwater, there was still a time limit. One bubble fruit could only last for one day, so he only had a few dozen of them with him at most. Soon after he used them, he would still die. The more Qiu Zhiming thought about it, the more sorrowful he felt, so he simply cried to his heart's content. Mo Tiange quietly watched this man who had already collapsed. She didn't do anything. She could take advantage of this moment to bring Qiu Zhiming into the virtual sky world, but Qiu Zhiming was missing and there was only one passage in this underground palace. What would she do if Ren Yufeng became suspicious? She had no idea what kind of ability Ren Yufeng had after obtaining the divine dragon's breath. Besides, this person was so weak. Even if she saved him, his willpower had already collapsed, so he didn't have any future. Qiu Zhiming didn't know that during this period of time, he had just brushed past the path of survival. He cried for a while, but as if he sensed something, he hastily stood up and cleaned up Xiahou Yuan's corpse. Xiahou Yuan had been entangled by that mass of black aura for a long time, and the waterproof barrier had long been destroyed, so she was submerged in the water, practically drowning to death bit by bit. After burning Xiahou Yuan's corpse with his Dantian real fire, Ren Yufeng came in. He seemed very satisfied with Qiu Zhiming's obedience, so he didn't say anything. He directly walked towards the stone platform next to the square and sat down cross-legged. This stone platform was where the dragon's foot was placed. Ren Yufeng sat on the dragon's palm bone. He seemed to be regulating his breath. Mo Tiange saw the black aura surging on his body, and gradually, the divine dragon's breath on the dragon's bones also slowly flowed towards him. Qiu Zhiming watched this scene in a daze. He was already intimidated by Ren Yufeng's means and didn't dare to make any movements. But Mo Tiange was different. She carefully observed every detail of Ren Yufeng's cultivation. The divine dragon's breath didn't produce devil aura. Perhaps she could find the answer from the details of Ren Yufeng's cultivation. After watching for a long time, Mo Tiange's eyes suddenly lit up. she discovered something. Ren Yufeng looked like he was absorbing the divine dragon's breath, but the divine dragon's breath only flowed towards him slowly, and the divine dragon's breath on the dragon's bones didn't decrease in the slightest. What did this mean? At the very least, it meant that the breath on Ren Yufeng's body wasn't the divine dragon's breath. But if it wasn't the divine dragon's breath, what could it be? Mo Tiange couldn't figure it out. After thinking for a long time, she could only be sure that the so-called divine dragon's secret technique Ren Yufeng used to make him the son of the divine dragon was either fake or completely wrong. If the method he used to absorb the divine dragon's breath was wrong, then what was going on now? Mo Tiange didn't have the slightest clue about these questions, so she could only helplessly give up. Instead of thinking about these questions, she might as well think about what she should do next. She was naturally safe inside the virtual sky world, but that was all. She couldn't stay inside for the rest of her life. Of course, she could use all kinds of spiritual panaceas to slowly cultivate inside the virtual sky world, but without any progress in her mental state, the danger of realm breakthroughs would be too great. Who knew how long it would take for her to grow strong enough to fight against Ren Yufeng? What if Ren Yufeng's evil technique also made realm breakthroughs very quickly? Mo Tiange sat inside the small hut inside the virtual sky world and pondered for a long time. All of a sudden, she had a flash of inspiration. Right? How could she forget that Ren Yufeng made a heart demon oath to her that he'd let her leave safely? Nevertheless, this thought only flashed in her mind for a second before Mo Tiange became discouraged again. For cultivators of the righteous path, a heart demon oath was a very important oath because inner demons were the biggest obstacle to realm breakthroughs for cultivators, but devil path cultivators didn't have this restriction. If Ren Yufeng had already turned into a devil cultivator, then a heart demon oath wouldn't have any effect on him because devil cultivators didn't need to experience inner demons to make realm breakthroughs. Things were back to square one. How could she leave? In the end, Mo Tiange sighed and muttered to herself, "Forget it. If I can't leave, I'll just treat it as if I'm in closed-door meditation here. Maybe it won't take several decades before Ren Yufeng makes a mistake in his own cultivation." At that time, just as she was thinking, she suddenly heard a loud noise coming from outside, followed by Qiu Zhiming's panicked voice. "Senior Marshal Brother Ren, what's wrong?" Mo Tiange looked up and saw that Ren Yufeng had finished his cultivation. He was now sitting on the high platform with a gloomy expression. Qiu Zhiming was sitting not far from him with blood on the corner of his mouth. It seemed he was thrown out by Ren Yufeng. Ren Yufeng cast a contemptuous glance at Qiu Zhiming. "What? Do you want me to make a mistake in my cultivation?" Sensing the killing intent in his words, Qiu Zhiming hastily shook his head. "Of course not, I'm just worried." "Worried about me?" Ren Yufeng sneered. "It'd be strange if you were worried about me. You'll only survive if something happens to me." Qiu Zhiming couldn't refute him. He just lowered his head and said nothing. Ren Yufeng thought coldly. "Don't be delusional. I won't die, and you don't need to expect those old guys to come and save you. This underground palace can't be opened without a special technique. We were only able to come in because the divine dragon's breath inside was attracted by the divine dragon monument, so an entrance was opened. Now, only the dragon's breath is left on the dragon bones, so those old guys can't come in even if they die." Once he finished talking, Ren Yufeng stood up and walked down the high platform. "What a pity! That Xianxing School's Yi Xiaotian ran away. That woman has a lot of treasures. It'd be great if we could get our hands on them." Qiu Zhiming looked up and said hesitantly, "That junior martial sister Yi?" He suddenly stopped halfway, as if he didn't know whether he should say it or not. Ren Yufeng glanced at him. "If you have something to say, just say it." Since Ren Yufeng spoke, Qiu Zhiming hastily said, "I didn't see that junior martial sister Yi go out at all. Our Zhengfa sect cultivators use the water escaping technique in the water, so our speed is much faster than hers. There's no reason she could escape faster than me." Ren Yufeng curled his lips. "You're too naive. That Yi Xiaoyan has a lot of treasures. Who knows if she has one or two treasures that could help her escape?" He then sighed and said, "That woman not only has a lot of treasures, but her cultivation level is also high. Judging from her age, I reckon she's not even 80 years old. I'm afraid she's even a bit younger. Qiu Zhiming didn't understand and stared at Ren Yufeng in confusion. Ren Yufeng frowned impatiently. So stupid. Do you remember how old Jiang Shuihan is? I think he's only about 50 years old, right? Yi Xiaotian's cultivation level is obviously higher than his, but he keeps calling her junior martial sister Yi. Obviously Yi Xiaotian's younger than him. Jiang Shuihan was Jiang Shanghong's current name. Although this Ren Yufeng has an eccentric temper and a cruel personality, he's not stupid. He actually knows how to calculate her age. Qiu Zhiming was taken aback by what Ren Yufeng said. Less than 50 years old? Junior martial sister Ye's already in the peak of the middle stage of the foundation building realm. She must have come out to gain experience so she can advance to the late stage. If she succeeds, wouldn't that mean? Reaching the late stage of the foundation building realm at 50 years old was indeed a bit shocking. Even geniuses, as many people called them, couldn't achieve this. Ren Yufeng snorted. You're too naive. Don't forget that she came from Xianxia School. Xianxia School's current strength isn't inferior to Tiandao Sect's. If it produces 1 or 2 nascent soul cultivators within 100 years, it'll surpass Tiandao Sect and become the #1 cultivation group in the Celestial Pole. It's different from Tiandao Sect. Tiandao Sect has the most people, so it also has a lot of nascent soul cultivators. Xianxia School is famous for producing genius cultivators. The current late-stage nascent soul cultivator, Lord Daoist Zhenyang, and Lord Daoist Miaoyi, who advanced 200 years ago, both succeeded in forming their nascent souls at the age of 200 or 300. In the core formation realm, there are also cultivators like Master Daoist Lingxi and Master Daoist Shoujing who advanced to the nascent soul realm around 100 years old and are very likely to advance to the nascent soul realm before 200 years old. Do you think it's impossible? But Qiu Zhiming was still confused. Junior martial brother Jiang clearly said that when they met, junior martial sister Yi was still an individual cultivator. Aren't cultivation geniuses nurtured by the school since they were young? Do you think they didn't miss it? Ren Yufeng's face was full of disdain. Among individual cultivators, the method of testing spiritual roots isn't complete. Maybe they simply didn't test this junior martial sister Ye's real aptitude. Besides, the fact that she could enter Xianxia School already shows that her aptitude isn't bad. Xianxia School isn't our Zhengfa sect. In the northernmost area, anyone with spiritual roots can join. In a large cultivation group like Xianxia School, they even pick cultivators with 3 spiritual roots. Qiu Zhiming didn't say anything. Although Ren Yufeng's temperament wasn't good, he couldn't compare to him in terms of intelligence. Besides, whether Mo Tiange was a genius or not didn't have much to do with him. In any case, Mo Tiange wouldn't save him. This Yi Xiaotian is Lord Daoist Xuanin's disciple. Even though Lord Daoist Xianin hadn't formed his nascent soul when she accepted him as her master, how could a late-stage core formation cultivator casually accept a disciple? Besides, she herself said she hadn't built her foundation when she entered Xianxia School, but she advanced from the aura-refining realm to the middle stage of the foundation-building realm in just a dozen or so years. With this kind of cultivation speed, how could she not be a genius? Ren Yufeng paused for a moment, then shook his head and said with a sigh, "What a pity. Such a young middle-stage foundation-building female cultivator. If I could use her as a human furnace, it would definitely be very good." As if he was imagining some scenes, evil aura appeared in his eyes. Inside the virtual sky world, Mo Tiange, who saw this scene, slammed her palm on the table. Ever since she entered Xianxia School, she had never seen anyone who wanted to use her as a human furnace. Human furnaces were heretical, and Xianxia School was an orthodox Dao school. Dao schools advocated purity of heart and few desires, so the path of plucking wasn't suitable for them. At most, it was only dual cultivation. Besides, as soon as she entered the school, she became Lord Daoist Jinghe's registered disciple, so no one really dared to use her as a human furnace, not even if they wanted to. Outside, Qiu Zhiming looked at Ren Yufeng with trepidation, not daring to say anything. After thinking for a while, Ren Yufeng regained his composure and shook his head regretfully. I actually let her escape. I really want to know what it's like to humiliate this kind of proud son of heaven. But it's not like I don't have a chance. When I finish practicing the divine dragon secret technique and my cultivation level improves greatly, I'll go to Kunwo. Maybe I'll run into her. Inside the virtual sky world, Imo was furious upon seeing Ren Yufeng's arrogant behavior. Zhengfa sect was also a Dao school, so it also didn't advocate the path of plucking. This Ren Yufeng became this shameless just because he obtained the divine dragon secret technique. His heart must have been very dirty in the past. Looking at Ren Yufeng's evil smile outside, Imo suddenly felt uncomfortable when she thought he might be fantasizing about her. She really wanted to slap that hateful face then chop him into pieces. After taking several deep breaths, she finally calmed down and sat down again. Thinking about this now was useless. If she wanted to kill Ren Yufeng, she had to think about it carefully. In fact, compared to Ren Yufeng, it wasn't like she didn't have any advantages. First of all, she could eat medicinal pills inside the virtual sky world, and the spiritual aura was very abundant. It was an excellent cultivating environment. She'd suppressed her cultivation level for several years, so it wouldn't be a problem for her to advance to the late stage of the foundation building realm now. It was just that there was some danger in advancing to the core formation realm, but it didn't mean there was no chance. Secondly, the origin of Ren Yufeng's cultivation technique was strange. Who knew what the consequences would be? Cultivation techniques from the devil path made it easier for her to suffer from aura deviation, and Ren Yufeng had a demonic barrier since a long time ago. Maybe he'd make a mistake in his cultivation, and he'd just give up. Lastly, Ren Yufeng didn't know she was inside the virtual sky world, so she could definitely look for an opportunity to sneak attack him. Imo thought about all these things again and again. In the end, Imo decided that before she came up with a better idea, she'd just cultivate here. She believed that if she just wanted to waste time, Ren Yufeng wouldn't be able to defeat her. Because she, who had taken longevity pills, had at least 800 years left to live. Chapter 187. After another round of cultivation, Imo opened her eyes. She had been in the virtual sky world for a month, but the situation outside hadn't changed at all. Ren Yufeng was still cultivating his divine dragon secret technique, and Qiu Jiming was still alive. Jiang Shanghong and Tang Feng must have escaped, but no one entered the underground palace. Perhaps even nascent soul cultivators couldn't open the entrance after the underground palace was closed, so Ren Yufeng was so sure. Ren Yufeng probably also felt bored being locked up in the underground palace alone, so not only did he not kill Qiu Jiming, but he also specially created a waterproof barrier to let him live. Seeing as Ren Yufeng gradually lost his killing intent, Qiu Jiming felt a lot more relieved and started to cultivate slowly. From Imo point of view as a bystander, Qiu Jiming probably wouldn't die for the time being. No one knew how long they would be locked up in this underground palace. If Ren Yufeng wanted someone to accompany him, Qiu Jiming wouldn't die. Maybe Ren Yufeng thought she needed a servant, so he might even give Qiu Jiming some benefits. Of course, these things didn't have much to do with her right now. The most important thing for her now was to cultivate as soon as possible and compete with Ren Yufeng to see whose cultivation progress was faster. Imo knew that closed-door meditation here would do her more harm than good. During this period of traveling outside, both her body and mind had grown. Advancing to the late stage of the foundation building realm wasn't a problem, but it was still far from the right time to advance to the core formation realm. If she forced a breakthrough, her inner demon would probably be difficult to overcome. But doing nothing obviously wouldn't do, so after realizing this, Imo began to rummage through the books in the virtual sky world, looking for a solution. Among these books, she found some medicinal pills that could help her advance, and some of them had the effect of protecting the heart and calming the mind. In the following time, Imo cultivated and concocted these medicinal pills at the same time. Although they couldn't fundamentally solve the problem, in any case, it was better than nothing. 8 months passed in the blink of an eye. Yin's spiritual aura of the 5 elements filled her whole body and circulated frantically in her meridians. Mo Tiange knew she was about to advance to the late stage of the foundation-building realm. She didn't panic at all. She breathed orderly while slowly guiding the spiritual aura to flow in her meridians. This kind of small realm advancement had a great impact on aptitude. If she still had the aptitude of 5 spiritual roots in the past, after she built her foundation, she would have to expend a lot of effort every time she made a small realm advancement. But now that she had changed her cultivation to the Sunu art of the origin, she wouldn't face any bottlenecks when it came to minor breakthroughs. As long as she was careful, it wouldn't be a problem. Spiritual energy continued to accumulate in her dantian, and the spiritual energy around her frantically surged towards her. Mo Tiange calmly absorbed the spiritual aura and stored it in her dantian, circulating it like this. Finally, his dantian was stuffed to the brim, unable to contain any more spiritual energy. Mo Tiange immediately stopped absorbing spiritual aura and started to circulate the almost blocked spiritual aura inside her dantian. Under her deliberate guidance, the spiritual energy began to circulate from her dantian to her meridians, and finally returned to her dantian. The circulation of spiritual energy became faster and faster, almost forming a vortex. It was as if his body had become a universe, with countless stars revolving around the center point. Suddenly, the stars moved to the extreme. With a rumbling sound, they collided with each other, striving to be the first to fight for a vaster world. The universe, under this pressure, suddenly expanded. Mo Tiange opened her eyes covered in sweat. She didn't have time to wipe off the wet stains on her face. She first checked her body and was delighted. Sure enough, she'd advanced to the late stage of the foundation-building realm. A small realm advancement wasn't as difficult as a big realm advancement. The density of spiritual aura wouldn't change, but her dantian would expand a bit. Mo Tiange only stopped after she felt her whole body was very carefree and there weren't any lingering problems caused by her realm advancement. She'd advanced to the late stage of the foundation-building realm, but she wasn't too happy. The late stage of the foundation-building realm wasn't a big deal. Ren Yufeng was already in the late stage of the foundation-building realm. Judging from his behavior, after using the so-called divine dragon secret technique, his strength must have reached the core formation realm, so she still couldn't do anything to him. In all fairness, Mo Tiange didn't think Ren Yufeng would quickly become a high-level cultivator after obtaining this divine dragon secret technique. Not to mention that this divine dragon secret technique looked really strange. He didn't have any divine dragon's breath on his body, and instead, his whole body was covered in devil aura. As for herself, with her spiritual roots of the origin, pure Yin constitution, and Sunu art of the origin, she didn't think she'd be much slower than Ren Yufeng if she cultivated with all her might. Therefore, this was actually a race of time. Ren Yufeng's divine dragon secret technique or her Sunu art of the origin would make realm advancements faster. As long as her cultivation speed surpassed Ren Yufeng's, there'd definitely be a day when she could openly go out and behead Ren Yufeng. Mo Tiange sighed softly, then tore open the crack in the sky of the virtual sky world to observe the situation outside. Ren Yufeng and Qiu Zhiming were still cultivating. In the past few months, she occasionally heard their conversations. Qiu Zhiming could be considered to have completely fallen. Under Ren Yufeng's oppression, for the sake of survival, he'd already become a pitiful person who attached himself to Ren Yufeng and only knew how to be a yes man. Coincidentally, when she successfully advanced to the late stage of the foundation-building realm, Ren Yufeng, who was outside, also stopped cultivating. When Ren Yufeng was cultivating just now, Mo Tiange noticed that the black aura on his body was getting thicker and thicker until it almost submerged his whole body. However, if this black aura was regarded as spiritual aura, Ren Yufeng's realm was still equivalent to the early stage of the core formation realm. He hadn't advanced again. Upon observing this, Mo Tiange heaved a sigh of relief. This showed that even if Ren Yufeng obtained the divine dragon secret technique, he still couldn't become a great cultivator with an extremely high cultivation level in one go. Instead, he had to cultivate step by step. In this case, she was quite confident that her cultivation speed wouldn't be much slower than Ren Yufeng's. Ren Yufeng, who stopped cultivating, seemed a bit confused. Perhaps he also encountered a bottleneck in his cultivation. He pondered for a moment, then took something out of his Qiankuan bag. Mo Tiange's eyes widened when she saw what he was doing. The thing Ren Yufeng took out was none other than a thick and heavy stone tablet. Qiu Zhiming once said that the first time Ren Yufeng entered the underground palace, he obtained a stone tablet which recorded the divine dragon's secret technique for obtaining the divine dragon's breath. Therefore, Ren Yufeng fabricated some lies to make them think there were a lot of treasures in this underground palace so he could use them to enter this underground palace again. Ren Yufeng seemed a bit emotional when he took out the stone tablet. He sighed while caressing the surface of the tablet. Then he straightened the stone tablet, then stared at it attentively as if he was studying it. Mo Tienge couldn't clearly see the contents of the stone tablet from where she stood, but that didn't prevent her from seeing its general content. As Qiu Zhiming said, the tablet was engraved with lines similar to paintings. Ancient characters had just been invented, so most of them still used murals as a method of recording. This stone tablet came from the ancient sacrificial temple in the underground palace, so it wasn't wrong to use paintings to record it. The content of the painting engraved on the tablet was very simple. A person was standing in front of a dragon skeleton, seemingly using some kind of secret technique. There were also many human bodies in some postures next to him. There were also several kinds of lines drawn inside the human bodies, which seemed to be the way spiritual aura circulated. Presumably, this was the divine dragon's secret technique Ren Yufeng mentioned. In addition, some simple characters seemed to be engraved next to some of the postures, but Mo Tienge didn't recognize these ancient characters. The term ancient era was used from the perspective of mortals. For cultivators, it could be summarized as the distant past, divine destruction, and Middle Ages. Since the beginning of the world, the immemorial era had been passed down for millions of years. The immemorial era that cultivators knew a lot about was a few 100,000 years after the gods established the rules of ascension. During those several 100,000 years, people with great divine power emerged one after another. Everyone yearned to ascend, and there were many people who ascended and became immortals. During that period of time, many characters and cultivation techniques were left behind, and some lucky people still obtain them even today. Many cultivators studied the characters and understood their meaning. Mo Tienge's virtual sky world was left behind during that period, so the characters inside it didn't hinder her. However, no one in the current cultivation world could recognize these ancient characters from several million years ago. Presumably, Ren Yufeng also didn't recognize them. Right now, he was frowning, trying to figure out the characters on the stone tablet bit by bit and making some movements from time to time. A thought flashed in Mo Tienge's mind. Since Ren Yufeng doesn't understand characters, could it be that the so-called divine dragon secret technique he comprehended is fundamentally wrong? Or maybe it's not a divine dragon secret technique at all, but a kind of evil art? The more she thought about it, the more likely it seemed. Otherwise, how could absorbing the divine dragon's breath make him look like he was covered in devil aura? Could it be that Ren Yufeng himself didn't realize something was wrong? Outside the virtual sky world, Ren Yufeng also seemed puzzled, as if he couldn't understand something. At that moment, Qiu Zhiming also stopped cultivating. He looked at Ren Yufeng with a bit of fear and curiosity. He was no longer worried that Ren Yufeng would kill him, but facing Ren Yufeng made him even more afraid. During the past year, Ren Yufeng's oppression had carved this fear in his heart. Now, when he saw Ren Yufeng's appearance, he habitually obeyed. At that moment, Ren Yufeng sighed and seemed to be talking to himself. Divine Dragon's breath, Divine Dragon's breath. Qiu Zhiming hesitated for a moment, then asked cautiously, "Senior Marshal Brother Ren, is there a problem?" Ren Yufeng glanced at him, stopped pondering, and said faintly, "Nothing, I just have some problems comprehending this cultivation technique." Qiu Zhiming didn't dare to ask again and just sat on the side in silence. Ren Yufeng pondered for a while, then said, "Divine Dragon's breath? Why would it be like this after absorbing it?" Mo Tienge was shocked. Mo Tiange was stunned. So Ren Yufeng also thought it was very strange? Sure enough, Ren Yufeng continued to say, according to what's written on this stone tablet, absorbing the divine dragon's breath will make you a son of the divine dragon. Your momentum will be vast and your breath will be holy, but, upon hearing what he said, Mo Tiange was 80% sure that Ren Yufeng must have cultivated the wrong cultivation technique. However, Ren Yufeng seemed to be unaware of this. He still muttered to himself, maybe this cultivation technique was originally like this? When he said that, Qiu Zhiming interrupted while trembling with fear. Senior martial brother Ren, is it possible that you comprehended the wrong cultivation technique? Once Qiu Zhiming said that, Ren Yufeng's expression changed. He shouted fiercely, impossible! I've obtained the divine dragon's breath. How could it be wrong? If it's wrong, how could I possibly have such great power? How could Qiu Zhiming dare to refute him? It must be because I haven't cultivated it to perfection. If I succeed, I can definitely transform into a divine dragon's body. Ren Yufeng said resolutely. He put away the stone tablet, then sat down again to continue cultivating. Mo Tiange, who was inside the virtual sky world, shook her head. Ren Yufeng was already possessed. This cultivation technique was definitely wrong, even if it allowed Ren Yufeng to obtain power. How could the divine and pure divine dragon's breath possibly produce black devil aura? However, it would be good if something happened to Ren Yufeng while cultivating. It was very easy to make mistakes while cultivating devil techniques. If he was possessed by the devil, killing him would be very easy. Just as she was about to close her eyes and continue cultivating, she suddenly realized something, so she opened her eyes again. Inside the virtual sky world, everything was calm, but outside the virtual sky world, it seemed to be shaking. Ren Yufeng stopped cultivating, and Qiu Zhiming also opened his eyes. The two of them looked around, puzzled and surprised. Qiu Zhiming shouted, Senior martial brother Ren, what's going on? Ren Yufeng frowned. His face was also full of confusion. The huge indoor square was shaking. From inside the virtual sky world, Mo Tiange could clearly see that the dragon bones in the square were also shaking. Ren Yufeng's expression changed several times. He closed his eyes and released his divine sense. Gradually, his face turned paler and paler. The 15th day of the 8th month. It's the 15th day of the 8th month. Mo Tiange was stunned, but soon, her expression also changed. On the 15th day of the 8th month, the land of Hiding Dragon would undergo drastic changes. The scenery inside would completely change, and it would be completely different from the previous year. After the 15th day of the 8th month, the disciples who stayed in the land of Hiding Dragon would never appear again. This was something Jiang Shanghong specifically emphasized before they entered the land of Hiding Dragon. They had stayed in this underground palace for more than 8 months. Before they came in, they mentioned that they had discovered this underground palace in the land of Hiding Dragon 3 months ago, just after the 15th day of the 8th lunar month. Now that it had been a year, the scenery of the land of Hiding Dragon was going to change. Mo Tiange vaguely remembered this matter, but she always thought she wouldn't be affected while she was inside the virtual sky world. Now, it seemed she indeed wouldn't be affected. The outside was shaking, but the inside of the virtual sky world was safe and sound. However, now that things had come to this, she was still a bit worried. If this underground palace disappeared, where would the virtual sky world appear? Would it disappear along with the underground palace, or would it stay where it was? Ren Yufeng and Qiu Zhiming, who were outside, were already panicking. Ren Yufeng was no longer a foundation-building cultivator, but he was still at a loss regarding this kind of unknown matter. Senior martial brother Ren, what should we do? What should we do? Qiu Zhiming sounded like he was crying. The underground palace was shaking more and more violently, and the dragon skeleton seemed like it would collapse at any time. Ren Yufeng, who was in a bad mood, shouted angrily, "Be quiet!" Qiu Zhiming didn't dare to refute him, so he swallowed his voice. However, his whole body went limp, and he stared at Ren Yufeng in a daze. Ren Yufeng thought for a while, but he seemed to have no idea. Obtaining the power of the divine dragon's breath made him forget the rule that the land of hiding dragon changed every year. Why did the scenery of the land of hiding dragon change every year? Where did the scenery of the previous year go? These questions had never been answered by anyone for several thousand years. The whereabouts of those disciples who stayed in the land of hiding dragon and didn't leave were also unknown. After they disappeared, they never came back. The ground shook more and more violently. They were already floating in the water, unable to stand still. This won't do. I can't do this, Ren Yufeng muttered to himself. He then forced himself to sit cross-legged and moved his spiritual aura. Mo Tiange didn't know what he wanted to do, but he obviously had a countermeasure. Ren Yufeng moved his spiritual aura and gathered his spiritual aura. The black aura on his body became more and more intense, and the divine dragon's breath on the dragon skeleton started to rush madly towards him. He wanted to forcibly absorb the divine dragon's breath to improve his cultivation level. Mo Tiange's expression changed. She didn't know what the consequences would be. According to reason, devil cultivation techniques could easily lead to spiritual energy deviation, especially when one tried to forcibly improve their cultivation level. However, this so-called divine dragon secret technique was something from several million years ago. Who knew whether it was a bit special or not? Besides, if Ren Yufeng succeeded, his cultivation level would be even higher. At that time, it would be difficult for her to kill this person and even escape. Of course, it'd be best if he failed or if he was taken to an unknown place by the land of hiding dragon. At least she could escape safely. The divine dragon's breath crazily rushed towards Ren Yufeng. The black aura on his body began to surge and gradually covered his whole body. At that moment, the underground palace shook even more violently. The dragon skeleton that had been placed there for several million years finally made a kacha sound. No one knew where it started, but it suddenly collapsed with a loud rumble. First, the skull rolled down, then the huge spine. One by one, the ribs were washed away by the water, and the tailbone slowly separated. The huge and majestic divine dragon skeleton instantly turned into a pile of white bones and scattered with the water. Qiu Zhiming, who was floating in the water, was hit by a huge dragon skeleton. He felt dizzy and lost consciousness. Ren Yufeng, on the other hand, was still operating his cultivation technique. Right now, he was completely covered by the black aura, so he couldn't be seen at all. Mo Tiange watched this scene anxiously. She hoped Ren Yufeng didn't succeed and hoped she wouldn't be affected inside the virtual sky world. After an indeterminate amount of time, the underground palace was still shaking. Ren Yufeng suddenly opened his eyes and screamed, "Ah!" The black aura on his body gradually dispersed, revealing his face. His complexion was deathly pale, his body was skinny, and he looked like a skeleton. However, his eyes were emitting a pitch-black light. Mo Tiange was gobsmacked. In the past few months, Ren Yufeng had always been surrounded by the black aura, so she hadn't seen his real face. She never expected that a person who could be considered handsome and clean a few months ago would actually become like this. Even if she said he was a mummy, there might still be people who would believe her. Ren Yufeng once again put his palms together. Black aura emerged from his palms in circles, wrapping around Ren Yufeng like a silkworm spinning a cocoon. More and more black threads appeared. Starting from Ren Yufeng's feet, they quickly wrapped around him. At that moment, the underground palace had been completely turned upside down. Mo Tiange stared fixedly at Ren Yufeng. She saw that the black threads on his body didn't stop winding around his waist and abdomen, all the way up to his head. In the end, they wrapped around his head tightly, firmly wrapping around his entire body. Outside the underground palace, a loud bang finally rang out. In the virtual sky world, Mo Tiange saw countless boulders starting to collapse. This ancient building was built bit by bit using boulders as tall as 2 people, and each boulder weighed 1,000 kilograms. But now, the boulders of this underground palace started to disintegrate. The 4 walls and the ceiling were washed away by the water and fell down one by one. The water surged violently, dragon bones floated everywhere, and boulders fell from the sky. Mo Tiange regretfully saw that when these boulders hit Ren Yufeng's body, they were all blocked by the huge black cocoon on his body. As for Qiu Jiming, he was already buried somewhere unknown by the boulders. After an indeterminate amount of time, everything finally calmed down. The water flow was no longer violent, the boulders also stopped, and even the water was slowly flowing away. Mo Tiange, who was safe and sound inside the virtual sky world, saw a ray of light coming from somewhere. Chapter 188. Elder sister, look. In the virtual sky world, Mo Tiange heard the childish voice of a child. She slowly opened her eyes and looked outside through the virtual sky world. Sunlight. Sunlight. Her eyes suddenly widened. Sunlight. It wasn't the glimmer of light coming through the water. It was indeed unobstructed sunlight. Yesterday, when the underground palace collapsed, she was safe and sound in the virtual sky world. She saw some light coming through the water, so she seemed to be not far from the surface. She couldn't figure out where she was, and seeing that Ren Yufeng also escaped, she was worried they were still in the land of Hiding Dragon, so she hid in the virtual sky world and didn't go out. Unexpectedly, when she opened her eyes today, the outside was completely different. There was no water, no rock walls blocking people's view, but sunlight. Bright sunlight. Xiaobao, don't run. Two children seemed to be playing outside, and their crisp and innocent voices could be heard. Elder sister, there's a very high mountain here. The children's voices were close to her ears. Mo Tiange looked around and found she seemed to be on a reef by the sea. Looking up, she saw the blue sky and bright sunlight. Looking down, she saw the rippling surface of the sea, and she could vaguely see the ruins and reefs below. Mo Tiange's heart skipped a beat. This definitely wasn't the land of Hiding Dragon, nor was it the northernmost sea, but below her was indeed the collapsed rocks of the underground palace. In other words, she and the underground palace had been moved elsewhere. Having reached this conclusion, she looked down to look for Ren Yufeng and the others. No, she couldn't find any traces of Ren Yufeng and Qiu Jiming. Qiu Jiming might be under the rocks, but Ren Yufeng was wrapped in black aura, so he should be easy to find. She didn't see him either. Could it be that he was washed away by the sea in the black cocoon after the collapse? This wasn't impossible. When the collapse ended, the scene she saw was still in the water. Maybe he was washed away by the turbulent water at that time. Thinking of this possibility, Mo Tiange sighed with relief. If that was the case, at least she could escape safely. Two children ran towards her. One was a naked boy about 4 or 5 years old, and the other was a girl about 7 or 8 years old. They were wearing dusty homespun clothes. Their skin was dirty, their cheeks were dry, and their hair was messy. Only their faces carried the innocence and kindness of children. Judging from their clothes, this place wasn't the extremely cold northernmost sea, but a relatively warm one. Mo Tiange smiled bitterly when she thought of this. She left West Kunwu, went to Wei country in the heartland, then entered Ziwei's Immortal's cave in Jin country, then was transported to the northernmost glacier through the transporting formation. From the northernmost glacier, she inexplicably arrived at a new place. Just like that, she kept getting tossed around. The little boy raised his head and looked at the huge rock on the reef. He said to his sister, "Sister, look, the mountain." His sister curiously tilted her head and looked at it for a while before shaking her head. "This is not a mountain." "Why not a mountain?" The little boy's eyes widened. "Dad said that a mountain is a lot of rocks. There are a lot of rocks here." The girl shook her head and said to her brother, "No, I went to see the mountain with Dad. The mountain is very high, and there are many trees and flowers growing on it." The little boy widened his big round eyes and looked at his big sister with a curious expression. "What are these?" This is a lot of stones," said the elder sister. "Sister." The little boy cheered when he saw something between the huge rocks. He ran over to pick up a snow-white object and raised his little hand. "Look, what's this?" The girl took the object from her brother's hand and looked at it curiously for a while before shaking her head. "I don't know." "Then let's take it back and ask Dad." Oh, there's another one here. The girl also picked up a white hard object among the huge rocks. Tiange could tell at a glance that it was a small toe bone of a dragon. Looking at the two children looking for dragon bones outside, she thought for a while, then touched the space between her eyebrows and came out of the virtual sky world. The fierce sea breeze blew on her sleeves. It was damp, but it wasn't cold. It seemed this place was very far from the northernmost glacier. The girl was the first to see her. She was stunned to see a person appearing out of thin air on the huge rock. The little boy also saw her, but he smiled with two dimples on his face. He pointed at Tiange and clapped his hands. Fairy. Sister, look, a fairy. Tiange couldn't help but smile at his innocent and cute appearance. Once she came out of the virtual sky world, she immediately used her divine sense to scan the surroundings. She only felt relieved when she confirmed there were no traces of other cultivators. She gently floated down from the pile of boulders. She floated here and there without using any force, which frightened the girl. She pulled her brother back several steps and asked while trembling, "What are you?" Tiange smiled and said softly, "Little sister, don't be afraid. I'm just a passerby." Unexpectedly, what she said made the little girl even more afraid. She hugged her brother tightly and said, "Don't take my brother away, Tiange felt strange. "Little sister, do I look like a bad person?" Before the girl could answer, the little boy already shouted, "No, you look like a fairy." Tiange smiled. Being regarded as a fairy by such an innocent and cute child was always a happy thing. But this little girl's attitude was really a bit strange. After thinking for a while, she continued to say softly, "Little sister, why are you so afraid? I won't hurt you." The little girl's eyes were guarded as she stared at her for a while. Seeing that her attitude was indeed very kind, she slightly let go of her suspicions and said hesitantly, "Are you really just passing by?" Tiange nodded with a smile, then asked curiously, "Why do you think I look like a bad person?" The girl hesitated for a moment and said timidly, "Father said that a lot of bad people have come to the village recently. They often catch children, boys like my younger brother, catch boys?" Tiange wrinkled her brows. A kidnapper? When she was a child in family's village, she once heard that there were kidnappers who specialized in abducting children. Most of them abducted boys. "Don't worry, I'm not a kidnapper," Tiange said with a smile, trying to calm the girl's nervousness. "If you're worried, take me to see your father, okay?" The girl hesitated for a moment and nodded. "Okay, our village is over there. As long as I shout, the adults will come." Looking at the direction the girl was pointing, there was indeed a small house not too far away. However, if he shouted, he might not be able to hear it. The girl's words were obviously a warning to her. Tiange couldn't help but smile. Although this girl was young, she was very vigilant and knew to protect herself and her younger brother. She was really smart and sensible. Seeing that Tiange really didn't do anything, the girl felt a bit relieved. She took her younger brother's hand and led him to the small house. The little boy liked her very much. As they walked, he raised his head and talked to her. "Fairy sister, where did you come from? Did you come from the sea? Father said there's a fairy on the sea who blesses us and protects us." "And you can say that?" Tiange nodded with a smile. "Why do you think I'm a fairy?" "Because fairy sister is very beautiful, just like the fairy mom said." The little boy raised his hand as if he wanted to hold her hand. The girl saw his movement and timidly looked at Tiange's snow-white clothes. She hastily slapped her younger brother's hand away. "Xiaobao, your hands are dirty." The little boy named Xiaobao looked gloomy. He uttered an "oh" and put his hand down. Tiange sighed inwardly. She then lowered her body and held the little boy's hand. "Don't worry, sister's clothes won't get dirty." Right now, she was wearing Xianxia School's Daoist robe, which was woven from Mount Taikong's cloud brocade. Even if ink was splashed on it, it would be clean after a shake. Xiaobao immediately smiled and said cheerfully, "It's really fairy sister. Mother said the fairy sister on the sea is very good to us. She's everyone's mother." Tiange was a bit confused. Fairy sister and mother? However, she understood what the child meant. The fairy sister he mentioned should be the god worshipped by the fishermen here. The small house wasn't far away. She answered the little boy's questions along the way and soon arrived. Tiange gave them a cursory glance. The small houses were all thatched cottages with grass roofs and mud walls. The best ones had stone walls. The residents' faces were dirty, their clothes were shabby, and their expressions were numb. Obviously, their lives weren't good. When they entered the village, some residents were drying dried fish at the village entrance while chatting. When they saw Tiange walking into the village with the two children, they all stopped and kept glancing at her. One of them boldly shouted, "Shui clan's Nanan, who did you bring back?" The girl glanced at the person who asked and answered, "Uncle Nyo Air, this sister said she's just passing by." Passing by? The adults at the village entrance gathered together and looked Tiange up and down. However, they didn't dare to speak and only dared to whisper to each other. The girl led her here and there until they finally arrived at a thatched cottage. Smoke was coming out of the cottage. Someone was washing in front of a big water tank in front of the cottage. "Mother," the girl called. The woman who was squatting and washing wild vegetables answered and said in a rough voice, "Where the hell did you go? I haven't seen you for a long time. Did you go crazy with your little brother?" The girl said, "Mother, we have a guest." "A guest?" The woman turned around and saw Tiange standing not far from them. She hurriedly stood up and wiped her hands on her apron. "Oh, this young lady?" She was a bit uncertain. Tiange was wearing Xianxia school's uniform. It was a Daoist robe, but it was different from the secular world. In the eyes of mortals, calling her Daoist priest seemed too beautiful and calling her young lady seemed too plain. Tiange didn't care about the way she addressed her. She smiled and said, "Greetings, sister-in-law. I was passing by and happened to meet these two children. I have some things I don't understand, so I came to ask." The woman felt a bit inferior in front of her. She combed her hair and tidied up her clothes before making an inviting gesture. "Young lady, our house is really simple and crude. If you don't mind, would you like to sit inside?" Tiange nodded with a smile and followed her into the house. The moment she entered, she saw that it seemed to be a hall. In the cramped space, there was a dining table and several stools. Although they were very old, they were still clean. On the wall facing the door, there was a picture of a sea god. It seemed to be a goddess. The woman invited her to sit on the bench next to the dining table and said to the girl, "Nan, go cook. Mother will accompany the guest." The girl nodded and glanced at Tiange, then went to the kitchen. Tiange was lost in thought for a while. She thought about herself a few decades ago, when she was the same age as this child. "Young lady?" Tiange regained her composure and smiled apologetically. "Sister-in-law, your daughter is obedient and capable. You're really blessed." The woman let out a sigh and waved her hand. "Young lady, you're too polite. This girl always goes out to play. But she's really capable. She can do whatever you ask her to do, and she can do it better than some adults. She also helps take care of her younger brother." It could be seen that although the woman didn't love her daughter on the surface, she was very proud of her daughter. Her smile was full of joy. Xiaobao also chimed in. "Sister is very good. She always takes me to play." His sister went to cook, but he refused to leave and still stayed by Tiange's side. Only then did the woman notice that her youngest son was holding Tiange's hand. She hurriedly came over and hugged him. "Xiaobao, quickly go wash your hands. Look at how you're playing." She then said to Tiange apologetically, "Young lady, children don't know any better. Did they dirty your clothes? Come wash them." Tiange shook her head. "It's okay, they won't get dirty." She dusted her clothes and waved her hands. There wasn't even a speck of dust on them. The woman holding Xiaobao stopped when she saw Tiange's actions. She seemed to be thinking about something, but eventually, panic appeared in her eyes. She said, Young lady, are you a fairy from Bishuan Court? I'm sorry. I was as blind as a bat. I'll kowtow to you." After she said that, She knelt down and started to kowtow. Tiange was surprised. She gently raised her hand and used her spiritual aura to block the woman's movements. She asked gently, "Sister-in-law, what are you doing? What fairy from Bishuan court?" Upon seeing Tiange's methods, the woman became even more convinced. She begged, "Fairy, fairy, please spare our lives. The children didn't do it on purpose, so I didn't recognize them." Tiange felt helpless. She waved her hand and used her spiritual aura to lift the woman up. "Since you know I'm a cultivator, you should answer me properly. There's no need to do this." The woman nodded obediently. She held Xiaobao and shrunk behind Tiange. Xiaobao was the only one who was completely unaware of this. He said curiously, "Mom, Sister Fairy is a good person, so why?" "Shut up." The woman covered Xiaobao's mouth and berated him. "Child, be obedient and don't interrupt." Xiaobao looked very curious, but he didn't dare to be disobedient. He just stared at his mother, the Sister Fairy in front of him, with his big, round eyes. Tiange was a bit confused. It was normal for mortals to revere cultivators, but this kind of fear wasn't normal no matter how she looked at it. Moreover, when the woman mentioned Bishuan court, it sounded a bit familiar. Yes, it was that medium-sized cultivation group that specialized in accepting female cultivators. Yan Ruoshu and the other two people she met in Ziwei's Immortal's cave were from Bishuan court. "So Bishuan court was built here? Sister-in-law, you should also sit." Upon hearing what Tiange said, the woman waved her hands repeatedly. I don't dare, I don't dare. How could I dare to sit together with Fairy?" Tiange didn't force her. She thought for a moment then asked, "Why are you so afraid of cultivators? You even said, 'Fairy of Bishuan court.' Is Bishuan court here?" Astonishment flashed across the woman's eyes. She thought for a moment then asked cautiously, "Fairy, you're not from Bishuan court?" Tiange shook her head. "I'm just a cultivator passing by this place. I have nothing to do with Bishuan court." The woman heaved a sigh of relief and finally showed a hint of a smile. "Fairy, please don't blame me. I misunderstood." Tiange smiled. "It's nothing. But sister-in-law, could you tell me the reason in detail?" The woman promptly nodded. She paused for a moment then said, "Fairy, you might not know, but our eastern sea is too remote. Even the emperor can't control this place, so the biggest force here is Bishuan court." "Wait." Tiange interrupted her, asking, "Did you say this place is the eastern sea?" The woman was surprised. "Fairy, don't you know?" "Oh," Tiange said faintly, "I didn't pay attention on the way here." The woman didn't dare to doubt her and continued to say, "In fact, the fairies of Bishuan court don't really care about mortals like us, but we must not offend them. If we offend them..." After a moment of hesitation, the woman changed the topic. "Just now, I saw that Fairy's clothes weren't dirty, so I thought Fairy was from Bishuan court." "I see." To mortals, cultivators were always aloof and remote. Since Bishuan court was here, the mortals here naturally revered them the most. Nevertheless, she really didn't expect she'd actually come to the Eastern Sea. The Eastern Sea was desolate. If she wanted to go back to Kunwu, she'd have to spend a lot of effort. The most convenient way was naturally to borrow the road from Bishuan court, but Tiange didn't really want to get in touch with them. Thinking up to this point made her frown. After watching for a while and seeing that the woman was still standing cautiously, Tiange smiled. "Sister-in-law, you don't have to be like this. I'm just passing by. I'll leave after I'm done asking around." "Oh." Although Tiange didn't release her spiritual aura pressure, knowing she was a cultivator already made the woman's heart feel heavy. Now that she heard what Tiange said, she heaved a sigh of relief. She then said politely, "Fairy, if you still want to ask anything, just ask me. There's nothing I don't know about the villages in the vicinity. If Fairy wants to ask about Linhai town, my husband also knows about it. He'll be back soon." Tiange smiled. "I already know this is the Eastern Sea, where Bishuan court is located, so I don't have anything else to ask. There's only one thing I want to ask. Yesterday, were there any movements nearby?" Movements? The woman was puzzled. She thought for a moment then said, "When the tide rose yesterday, there seemed to be thunder. Is that what Fairy wants to ask?" Thunder? Mo Tiange pondered for a moment. What else? Xiaobao heard rumbling sounds yesterday. Today, when I went out to play with elder sister, I saw a mountain. Xiaobao, who was in the woman's arms, interrupted. Mo Tiange was a bit interested in what this child said. Is it the mountain you saw me on? Xiaobao nodded vigorously. There wasn't a mountain yesterday, but when I went out to play with elder sister today, I saw one. In fact, the mountain he was talking about was nothing but a pile of rocks. Xiaobao stretched out his hand again. Fairy sister, look. This is what I found on the mountain. In his dirty little hand lay a pure white bone object. It was precisely the divine dragon bone he picked up. Mo Tiange looked at it, then said to the woman with a smile, "Sister-in-law, I happen to have something I want to ask you for help with." Upon hearing that she needed help, the woman promptly said, "Fairy, please tell us what you need. Please go to the side of the mountain this child mentioned and help me pick up all these bones." Huh! The woman was dumbfounded. What kind of request is this? Mo Tiange took out a bag from her robe and put it on the table. "For every bone you pick up, I'll give you a golden bead." She opened the bag, revealing a glittering golden bead the size of a finger. Chapter 189. Originally, Mo Tiange didn't intend to reveal her identity. She just wanted to use the gold, silver, and treasures of the secular world to let the fishermen here help her collect the dragon bones. She didn't expect this woman to be so astute and recognize her identity as a cultivator. However, the fishermen here revered cultivators so much, which made things easier. While revering them, she could also entice them with benefits so that they would work more diligently. Seeing this bag of gold beads, the woman's eyes widened. They lived in such poverty that the most they'd seen was some broken silver, which was already a lot of wealth. As for gold, they could only occasionally see it in the nearby towns. Mo Tiange coughed softly. "Sister-in-law, if you can give me all the bones, then all these gold beads will be yours." This bag of gold beads was a gift from Yi clan when she left. It was more convenient to have treasures when she traveled in the secular world, so Mo Tiange didn't stand on ceremony and accepted it. Right now, it was just right for these mortals to work for her. The woman regained her composure. For a moment, she didn't know how to answer. She was both happy and nervous. "Fairy, are you telling the truth?" Right after she said that, she slapped her own mouth. "Of course I'm telling the truth. I was being too talkative. But what kind of bones are you talking about? Where are they?" Mo Tiange smiled at Xiaobao. "Xiaobao, you know where they are, right?" Xiaobao promptly nodded. Fairy sister was talking about the mountain. As he spoke, his eyes widened with curiosity. "Fairy sister, are these bones? Why are they different from the bones father told me about?" Mo Tiange smiled but didn't answer Xiaobao's question. She took out a bag from inside her robe, handed it to him, and said softly, "Xiaobao, take your mother to the mountain to collect bones. You can eat these fruits, okay?" These were the remaining bubble fruits. They tasted very sweet and were good for coaxing children. Xiaobao took a bubble fruit and took a bite. Sure enough, he was very happy. "It's delicious." Seeing that he was happy, Mo Tiange said to the woman, "Xiaobao knows where they are. You should go with him. The sooner you can collect them, the better. It's best if you call more people. Some bones are very big. You don't have to worry about others collecting them. Your family won't be able to collect them all. I'll reward you later." How could the madam dare to object? She hastily held her youngest son's hand and shouted, and don't cook any more. Go call your father back." She then turned towards Mo Tiange with a flattering smile. "Fairy, please wait here. We'll go right away." Mo Tiange nodded with a smile and watched as the family started to get busy. Not long after, the man was called back by the girl. When he heard what his wife said, he hastily came over and kowtowed to Mo Tiange. Mo Tiange left the girl behind to talk to her and sent the husband and wife to pick up the dragon bones for her. Knowing that Emo Tienga was a cultivator, the girl's attitude was respectful. She stood by the side and answered every question Emo Tienga asked. This was a small fishing village by the East Sea. Other than some similar fishing villages nearby, there was only one big city called Waterfront City. Behind Linhai Town was the cultivation group Bichuan Court. This place was too remote and didn't even have a country, so Bichuan Court was the biggest force here. The girl was still young and didn't know much. Emo Tienga calculated in her mind and roughly understood her current location. The Kunwa mountain range stretched across the southern part of the celestial pole all the way to the southeast. Demonic Mountain blocked the Devil Path in the northeast. Therefore, the southern part of the East Sea was Tiandao Sect's territory while the northern part was the Devil Path's territory. Based on Emo Tienga's speculation, they were probably in a small part of the sea in the north. In other words, the Devil Path was most likely to be on their west side. Once she reached this conclusion, Emo Tienga felt a bit vexed. This place was very likely to be a part of the sea next to the Devil Path's demonic mountain, which was very dangerous. If they happened to run into the Devil Path, they'd be in a lot of trouble. It seemed the best way to leave this place was to find Bichuan Court. Since Bichuan Court was located here, they must have a safe way to communicate with the outside world. Of course, the most important thing for her now was to pick up the dragon bones. Although she didn't know what use the dragon bones from several million years ago had, the divine dragon's breath on them couldn't be faked, so they were definitely useful. However, there were too many dragon bones. When the underground palace collapsed, many of them must have been washed away by the water. Thinking up to this point, Emo Tienga felt it was quite a pity. If she could collect a whole set of dragon bones, it'd be more convenient for her to study them. Now, she could only pick up as many as she could. After asking the little girl, Emo Tienga learned that this family surname was Shui. Their father was called Shui-san, and their mother was called Shui-san's sister-in-law. She herself didn't have a name. She was the only girl in the family. When she was born, the adults only called her a Nan, and others only called her Shui family's Nanan. What kind of name was a Nan? There were dozens of families here, and most of their daughters were called a Nan when they were born. It wasn't until they got married that they became whose family's sister-in-law. When they got a bit older, they became whose family's mother-in-law. From birth to death, most girls didn't have a name. Seeing the girl's secretly envious gaze, Emo Tienga felt it was quite a pity. This pair of siblings was very smart. Although Nan was young, her speech was very logical and she knew to be wary of outsiders. Xiaobao was even smarter. It wasn't easy for a 4- or 5-year-old child to speak so fluently. Moreover, with his family's financial situation, he basically had no one to teach him since he was a child. Once Emo Tienga praised him, Nan immediately stuck out her little chest proudly. Xiaobao can already speak when he's just 1 year old. Everyone in our village says Xiaobao is like a star that descended from the sky. Father also said that when Xiaobao grows a bit older, he'll send him to the city to study. At that time, he'll find a job in the city and he'll be able to live like a city person. Emo Tienga asked with a smile, why didn't he take the county-level exam? Wouldn't he be able to become an official? Nan shook her head. Father said we can't go out for the rest of our lives. There are monsters living in the west. If we go there, we'll be eaten. Emo Tienga frowned inwardly when she heard what Nan said. Sure enough, the monsters she mentioned must be people from the Devil Path. Nan continued to say, unfortunately, I wasn't chosen by Bichuan Court. It'd be great if I could enter Bichuan Court. Emo Tienga was rather astonished. She asked, how does Bichuan Court choose its disciples? Nan answered, girls living near Linhai Town will go to Bichuan Court to have their spiritual roots checked when they're 8 years old. If they pass, they can enter Bichuan Court. At that time, their whole family can enter the city and live like a city person. As she spoke, Nan once again said proudly, however, I also have spiritual roots. The aunt who receives me at Bichuan Court said my spiritual roots are a bit lacking, so I can't enter Bichuan Court. Nevertheless, she's already recorded my name, so if they're short on maids, they'll call me over. You also have spiritual roots? Mo Tiange was rather surprised. Among mortals, there weren't many people with spiritual roots, yet she happened to run into one. Nen nodded. Her face was slightly red. The aunt who receives me said I have 5 spiritual roots. Mo Tiange nodded. 5 spiritual roots weren't considered rare. In her memory, Bichuan Court was a small cultivation group about the same size as Yunwu sect. Now that she knew it was located on the coast of the Eastern Sea, a small place sandwiched between the Devil Path and the Eastern Sea, it probably wouldn't be a problem for them to accept someone with 5 spiritual roots as a maid. Unfortunately, although Nan's spiritual roots weren't obvious, she had a good temperament and was also smart. In addition, since Bichuan Court's influence in this area was so big, it'd be better for her to collect all the dragon bones and leave as soon as possible to avoid news of this being leaked. Divine dragon bones from 1,000,000 years ago. Not to mention a small cultivation group like Bichuan Court, even the 7 great cultivation groups would be tempted by them. After some thought, Mo Tiange changed the topic. Right? You girls with spiritual roots can enter Bichuan Court, but what about boys? Bichuan Court only accepts female disciples, right? Nen nodded. So boys can only be accepted as outer disciples by Bichuan Court unless their spiritual roots are very good. I heard from the aunt who receives them that male disciples can only be considered real Bichuan Court disciples after performing dual cultivation with a female disciple. Mo Tiange raised her eyebrows in astonishment. This Bichuan Court was really an anomaly. Not only was it built in such a strange place, but it also had such strange rules. This place faced the Devil Path in the west, so mortals here couldn't leave this place their entire lives, so they could only enter Bichuan Court. Unfortunately, Bichuan Court was a cultivation group that only accepted women. Because of that, in Bichuan Court, the status of men was far inferior to that of women. This was an anomaly in the entire celestial pole. Mo Tiange roughly understood the situation in the Eastern Sea from Nen. In the afternoon, the people who picked up the dragon bones came back one after another. The Shui couple was indeed obedient. They mobilized the whole village to either carry the dragon bones, and all the dragon bones were picked up. The biggest one was a leg bone that required 4 or 5 people to carry. Mo Tiange gave the golden bead to Nen. Whenever someone came with a dragon bone, she would give it to them. For a large leg bone like this one, she would give them a bit more. After the villagers obtained the golden bead, they were still unsatisfied, so they once again agreed to go to the beach to search. This search lasted until nightfall. Mo Tiange wasn't in a hurry. She asked the fisherman's family for an empty house and waited for 2 more days until they couldn't find any more dragon bones. Most of these dragon bones must have been washed away when the underground palace collapsed. She tried to piece them together, but she only managed to piece together a leg bone and some scattered bones. However, it would be fine as long as she collected all the dragon bones here. If the people of Bichuan Court hadn't seen these dragon bones before, they wouldn't be suspicious even if they heard a strange cultivator was looking for some bones here. The fishermen here were also very happy to obtain her golden bead, especially the Shui couple. Mo Tiange gave them some more golden leaves, so they worked even harder. After collecting the dragon bones, Mo Tiange asked the Shui couple about some things about Bichuan Court, then planned to leave. Sure enough, the Shui couple said that aside from the sea, they had no other way to communicate with the outside world. However, they only had a small boat, so going to the sea was very dangerous. Moreover, since ancient times, they'd never known where the sea led. Mo Tiange then asked how the people of Bichuan Court left. The Shui couple didn't dare to talk nonsense, so they said that if she wanted to leave, she could go to Linhai town and ask around. Bichuan Court had a shop there. Mo Tiange was quite flabbergasted. Bichuan Court was the only cultivation group here, so why would they open a shop? After the Shui couple's explanation, she learned that although there was only one cultivation group here, there were many individual cultivators, especially male cultivators with low aptitudes. Since Bichuan Court didn't accept them as disciples, they could only ponder the cultivation path on their own. After a long time, many small cultivation clans and individual cultivators appeared here. After staying in this fishing village for several days and dealing with the dragon bones, Tiange decided to take a trip to Linhai town. If she wanted to return to Kunwu, asking Bishuan court for help was the most convenient way. Chapter 190. Xiaobao was very reluctant when he heard Tiange wanted to leave the fishing village. Outsiders rarely came to the fishing village. Besides, Tiange also gave him delicious food. He had never eaten such sweet fruits before. The Shui couple naturally wouldn't let their child fool around, so they hurriedly coaxed him. In the end, Tiange gave Xiaobao several unimportant medicinal pills that were damaged from the concoction as if they were candy, finally coaxing him. All right. Tiange glanced at the 4 members of the Shui family in front of her. Tell me, which direction should I go to Linhai town? Hearing the question, Shui-san quickly replied, Fairy, just head north. You'll reach Linhai City in about half a day's journey. For a foundation-building cultivator like her, half a day's journey for mortals would only take about 10 minutes. Tiange nodded. Thank you. Just as she was about to leave, Shui-san hastily called out, Fairy, please wait. Tiange stopped, turned around and asked, What's the matter? Although her attitude was calm, she was a cultivator after all, so she had to be imposing in front of mortals. Shui-san subconsciously became a bit timid, so he only mustered up his courage after Shui-san's wife bumped him on the back. This lowly one has a request. I sincerely hope Fairy can agree to it. What is it? Tell me. Seeing that Tiange didn't refuse, Shui-san was delighted. He turned to look at Nin and said, Fairy, my family's and also has spiritual roots, but the fairies of Bishuan court said and spiritual roots are a bit poor, so she can only enter the group when she has a quota. Our Shui family finally has a child with spiritual roots, so this lowly one is very anxious. If my family's in can? Shui-san's wife saw Tiange frowning slightly, so she immediately bumped her husband again and took over the topic with a smile. Fairy, my husband can't explain it clearly, so I'll just say it directly. My family's in said that if she learns the law of immortality, she'll be chosen first next time. You can buy it in the Law of Immortality City, but what do you need to buy it, spirit stones? How could I have that? These past few days I helped Fairy do a few things, so Fairy gave us a lot of gold. We shouldn't have asked for too much, but… You want the immortal technique, don't you? Tiange interrupted her. The woman nodded and added, Fairy, we won't take your gold. We just want you to give us an immortal spell. If it's not enough, you can take whatever you like. How could a mere mortal fisherman have what he wanted? When Tiange saw and staring at her nervously from the side, she raised her hand and stopped the madam's long-winded speech. All right, I understand. She took out several jade slips from her chenkuan bag. After thinking for a moment, she put the jade slips back and took out a book. And was still immortal and couldn't use her divine sense. Gold is of no use to me, and can be considered to be fated with me, so I'll give this cultivation technique to you. And took the thin book. She was so excited that her face turned red. The Shui couple even pulled her to kowtow. Thank you, Fairy. Thank you, Fairy. Tiange waved her hand and didn't say anything else. With a shake of her sleeves, she flew up with the wind. Shui-san's family, as well as all the villagers of this unknown fishing village, were attracted by this scene. Tiange saw Ann's eyes full of hope and envy when she raised her head. She gave her a smile, then turned into a flight light and disappeared into the horizon. A beginner's cultivation technique was as easy as lifting a finger for her, but it was extremely difficult for this little girl who hoped to walk on the path to immortality. Tiange didn't mind doing good occasionally. It could even be said that because she was born immortal, she was kinder to mortals than to cultivators. However, whether she could really walk on the path to immortality depended on herself. She shook her head, threw these thoughts to the back of her mind, and focused on hurrying on her journey. Linhai town wasn't far. After 10 minutes, Tiange could already see the city walls in the distance. What surprised her was that she originally thought Linhai Town was only a small town in such a small place. She didn't expect its city walls to be so magnificent that they weren't inferior to some medium-sized cities in Middle-earth. What surprised her even more was that as soon as she approached Linhai Town, her cloud-treading boots seemed to go out of control. It seemed there was a flight restriction laid in the town. After thinking for a while, Immortal landed outside the town and walked towards Linhai Town on foot. It was noon, so there were only a few people going in and out of the town gate. There was only one soldier guarding the gate. He stood at the gate, leaning against the wall and dozing off, not caring about other people going in. Immortal felt a bit strange. Didn't this Linhai Town have no country? Why did it have soldiers? But the strangest thing was yet to come. Just as she was about to enter the town, the dozing soldier glanced at her in a daze and immediately woke up. He rubbed his eyes and ran to stop her. Soon after, the soldier respectfully saluted her and said, "Fairy, please wait." Immortal raised her eyebrows and asked, "How did you know I'm a cultivator?" Her question made the soldier even more surprised. He blurted out, "Fairy, aren't you an immortal from Linhai?" Immortal frowned but didn't answer. The doubts in her heart grew stronger. Seeing her unsightly expression, the soldier hastily said, "Fairy, please calm down. Immortals from Linhai all know we can distinguish mortals from immortals. Fairy doesn't seem to know, so I guessed Fairy isn't from Linhai." Immortal nodded. "I'm indeed a foreign cultivator who came here by accident." "Why did you stop me? Could it be that Linhai Town doesn't allow outsiders to enter?" The soldier waved his hand repeatedly. "Fairy, you misunderstood. There's no such thing. Our Linhai Town is supported by master immortals and fairies, so how could we not allow Fairy to enter the town?" "Then why are you?" the soldier explained. "Individual cultivators from Linhai have to register in the register before entering the town, so Fairy, please leave your name." Immortal felt a bit displeased. Linhai Town's rules were really strict. She'd been to many places, but none of them dared to have such rules for cultivators. Cultivators hated being controlled the most. Not to mention that they had to leave their names in order to enter the town, which really made people feel conflicted. Upon seeing Immortal's expression, the soldier explained, "Fairy, this is a rule set by the fairies of Bichuan Court. I'm just a mortal, so I'm only following orders. So if I don't leave my name, I can't enter the town?" Immortal cast him a cold glance. Although she wasn't tall, the soldier couldn't help but feel a bit shorter in front of the aura a cultivator unconsciously emitted. Nevertheless, he still persisted and said, "I'm sorry, Fairy, these are the rules." Immortal was now certain that the flying restriction over Linhai Town was also set up by Bichuan Court. Apparently, Bichuan Court's influence in this area of the sea was extraordinary. Not only did it control a town, but it also controlled the individual cultivators in the vicinity. Immortal thought for a moment, then said with a cold expression, "Where do you want me to leave my name?" The soldier was afraid of angering an immortal. Although he was working for Bichuan Court, an immortal like him couldn't afford to offend any immortal. Upon hearing what Immortal said, he was delighted. He took a register from the side and handed it to her. "Fairy, please leave your name here." Immortal flipped open the thick register. She saw many names written on it, and she clearly remembered when they entered and when they left. Without pausing, she took the pen the soldier handed her and wrote down the 3 words, "Yi Shaon," in the blank space. She then threw the pen back and said, "Is this okay?" The soldier nodded repeatedly. It's okay. Fairy, please come in." Immortal didn't say anything more and walked into the town. After she entered the town, the soldier carefully recorded her name, Yi Xiaoyan, female, cultivation level unknown, entered the town at noon on the 20th of August. Immortal felt quite unhappy. She originally had a bad impression of Bichuan Court because of the 3 female Bichuan Court disciples she met in Ziwei's Immortal's cave, but now, her impression of Bichuan Court was even worse. Although Bichuan Court was the only cultivation group here, controlling other cultivators like this was really too overbearing. In Kunwu, not to mention a small cultivation group like Bishuan Court, even big cultivation groups like Tiandao Sect and Xianxia School never asked people to register their names in the towns at the foot of the mountain. Even in some private towns, the most they'd do was ask about someone's background and issue them an identification card. They'd never allow a mortal to record the comings and goings of cultivators like this. However, the fact that Bishuan Court dared to do this showed that they were very powerful. If she was in Kunwu, she wouldn't have to enter the town, but here, this was the only big town. If she didn't want to have a falling out with Bishuan Court, she could only register her name. Mo Tiange helplessly made this choice and entered the town. In any case, her name was fake and Yi Xiaotian didn't have any reputation, so it didn't matter if she told others. However, this matter gave her an idea. Bishuan Court was so overbearing. What if she cut off her path of retreat when she asked them for a passage? She was alone now. No matter how bad Bishuan Court was, they still had several core formation cultivators. That being the case, she might as well make some inquiries and ask others about Bishuan Court's situation in the Eastern Sea. After making up her mind, Mo Tiange observed the situation in Linhai Town. If she didn't know about it in advance, she really wouldn't have expected Linhai Town to be in such a desolate place like the coast of the Eastern Sea. The wide streets and the numerous buildings weren't any worse than those in the Middle Territory. However, the residents here were still somewhat different. For example, most of them were dressed like fishermen. Even the customers sitting in the restaurants on the street wore very ordinary clothes. Presumably, this place didn't have many products, so there were no gorgeous brocades. Mo Tiange pondered for a moment, then turned into an extraordinarily lively restaurant and walked directly to the shopkeeper. Just as she was about to speak, the shopkeeper raised his head and immediately showed a respectful expression. "Fairy, please come in, please come in." Mo Tiange was rather puzzled. Forget about the soldiers guarding the gate. Since they were sent to guard the city gate, they must know how to distinguish mortals from cultivators, but how could this ordinary shopkeeper actually recognize her at a glance? "Shopkeeper." Mo Tiange didn't move. "How did you recognize that I'm a cultivator?" The shopkeeper looked surprised. "Fairy, aren't you a local?" The fat shopkeeper rubbed his hands and explained with a smile, "Immortals in Linhai all live together with us mortals. After a long time, we can recognize you at a glance. Fairy's bearing is calm and graceful like a fairy. You must be an immortal without a doubt." "Is it?" Mo Tiange nodded. "I'm indeed not a local." "Oh, it's rare to see immortals from other places." "Fairy, whatever you eat or drink today, it's all free of charge." Mo Tiange shook her head lightly. "I didn't come to eat or drink, I just wanted to inquire about some information from the shopkeeper." You're tuning in to the Wang Lin's Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.